Chapter 497. The lightning tribulation triggered by Li Daocheng's breakthrough and Yuanying's breakthrough was completely attracted by the nine heavens' primordial lightning and bombarded Fiend's saber. Bolts of lightning constantly struck down. Even though Fiend's saber was a fiend with Hades, he couldn't withstand the bombardment of the nine heavens' primordial lightning. Fiend's saber suddenly realized something and turned to look at Li Daocheng, who was standing in the passageway 100 meters away. "You, human cultivator, how did you do it?" Fiend's saber let out a low roar, but before he could finish his sentence, a bolt of lightning struck down and drowned out his voice. Boom! "I am going to kill." Fiend's saber let out a roar as he attempted to break through the lightning barrier and rush towards Li Daocheng. However, the nine heavens' primordial lightning wasn't that easy to break through. Li Daocheng stood there calmly as he watched Fiend's saber being struck by lightning. It was as if he didn't see Fiend's saber's resentful gaze. Li Daocheng was thinking that it would be a pity if Fiend's saber was killed by the nine heavens' primordial lightning. If he were to kill the Fiend the instant he was killed, would the hot-blooded upgrader silently believe that he had killed him? Li Daocheng pondered as the Taiji symbol on his palm glowed slightly. The sword's shadow within it was much clearer than before. It was no longer the blurry image from before. Roar! Fiend's saber let out a terrifying roar that shook the entire mountain. However, no matter how much he raged, his fiendish aura soared into the sky. He was unable to break through the lightning barrier. Fiend's saber's aura rapidly weakened as his body was charred black and emitted green smoke. The tribulation clouds in the spatial rift above his head became denser and denser as the primordial lightning became stronger each time. When the tribulation clouds formed a vortex, there was a flash in the center. A bolt of lightning that gathered dozens of lightning bolts struck down. Fiend's saber circulated all the fiendish aura in his body to resist this powerful strike. Boom! Fiend's saber let out an angry roar as he forcefully resisted the strongest primordial lightning. When this strike landed, the spatial rift above Fiend's saber's head began to shrink slowly. The power of the descending tribulation lightning also decreased. The nomological powers of the spirit realm on the 13 Specter were ultimately chaotic and not as powerful as the nomological powers of the pure spirit world. After losing all its fiend treasures and using up most of its fiend chi, the fiend saber used the innate strength of its fiend body to forcefully resist the nomological force. Feeling the reduction of the lightning power, the demonic blade smiled. Ha ha ha, as long as I survive this nine heavens lightning tribulation, the true body of the 13 Specter will be able to come and go as it pleases. It won't be threatened by the lightning tribulation anymore. Whoosh! Poochie! A sword radiance slashed out vertically. Devil Blade maintained his laughing posture as his body was split vertically into two halves. With a flash of green light, Li Daocheng appeared in front of Mo Dao with the Tsang ink in his hand. The saber light flashed across Mo Dao's neck. His head, which had already been split in half, was chopped off from his neck. Electric light flashed in Li Daocheng's eyes as he blasted out the Eye of Thunder punishment. Ka! The two halves of the demonic saber's head that flew into the air were blasted into smithereens. The two halves of the demonic saber's body exploded from the inside out. Li Daocheng waved a ball of flame in his hand. Boom! The flames ignited. Mo Dao's body was burned to ashes. An egg-sized fiend core fell to the ground. A blob of black blood condensed in the air and floated slowly. Fiend core and fiend essence blood. These two were unique core parts of the Hades fiend. They were the same as Jin Dan's Jin Dan and Yuanying's Yuanying. The fiend core and fiend essence blood were the crystal cores condensed by the netherworld fiend's cultivation to store fiend chi. The fiend essence blood was the netherworld fiend's soul, while the fiend core was the netherworld fiend's essence soul. Li Daocheng grabbed the fiend essence blood. It still wanted to escape, but after experiencing the nine heavens lightning tribulation, the fiend essence blood was already on the verge of death. How could it escape? The moment it touched Li Daocheng's palm, it immediately turned into a cloud of smoke and evaporated. Li Daocheng's breakthrough this time wasn't the best time. The spiritual energy in his body was severely depleted, and now was the perfect time to replenish it. The absorbed complete fiend soul, obtained soul power, converted into spiritual energy. The notification sounded, and Li Daocheng's spiritual energy immediately recovered. However, there was no notification that he had killed the underworld fiend. Mo Dao was not dead yet. His essence soul fiend core was still there. Li Daocheng picked up the fiend core. This was the first time he had seen such a thing. It was black and shiny, and there seemed to be a dark shadow floating inside. This was similar to the yuanying that was nurtured in Jin Dan. The fiend core nurtured a fiend spirit. The fiend core upgrader's spiritual energy was completely absorbed by yuanying, and Li Daocheng's condition was restored to full. Looking at the fiend core in his hand, Li Daocheng's lips curled up. His psychokinesis entered the fiend core like a tide. "Don't kill me!" A shrill scream came from the fiend core. Li Daocheng didn't seem to hear it. Instead, his psychokinesis field became stronger. The weak soul consciousness of Mo Dao was instantly wiped out and disappeared from the world. All that was left was a black, shiny, and transparent fiend core. Li Daocheng had used up all his belongings on this trip to 13 Specter. He had nothing left. The Grand Wizard core that he had used to earn money was also used up. Li Daocheng had thought that he had lost everything this time. When he went back, he planned to make talismans in seclusion and work hard for a while to earn money. With this fiend core, Li Daocheng immediately became rich. A Grand Wizard core was enough to buy half of a cultivation metropolis on a 4th-class cultivation planet. For example, half of Tianyuan City on Blue Bay Star. On the other hand, a fiend core was enough to buy the entire Blue Bay Star. The difference in value was like heaven and earth. As long as he sold this fiend core, Li Daocheng's value would skyrocket overnight. He would surpass more than 80% of the market value of the cultivation companies in the Shenghua Federation. Fiend cores were not something that could be obtained easily. Even soul formation cultivators had to risk their lives to hunt for them. Li Daocheng used his telekinesis and put the fiend core into his storage ring. The whole process was witnessed by Yu Yan, who was lying in Li Daocheng's arms. Her charming eyes were filled with shock. Yu Yan's already stunning image in her heart was refreshed to an unimaginable height once again. Yu Yan could not hide her surging emotions. This young man was like a divine weapon that had appeared out of nowhere. He had grown into an immortal-like existence in such a short time. Even Ming Mo had been killed by him. Ming Mo was an existence that surpassed soul formation. He had been killed by Li Daocheng just like that. Although he had not killed him with his own hands and had used the 9 heavens' primordial thunder, Yu Yan knew how dangerous it was after witnessing it with her own eyes. However, Li Daocheng had used some unknown method to succeed and come out unscathed. How many trump cards did this guy have that he had yet to reveal? Yu Yan felt more and more that Li Daocheng was like a reincarnated immortal who had failed his tribulation. Otherwise, how could he have killed Ming Mo during the Jin Dan stage? No one in the history of the Shenghua Federation had ever accomplished such a feat alone. Just as Yu Yan's imagination was running wild, a gentle spirit qi entered her body. The wisp of fiend qi that had been trapped in Yu Yan's body was quickly washed away. Yu Yan felt her body go numb, and she almost fell. Fortunately, a large hand grabbed her slender waist in time to prevent her from falling. After being trapped by the fiend qi for a long time, Yu Yan's entire body went numb. Her blood seemed to have frozen, and she was a little dazed. "Commander Yu, are you okay?" Li Daocheng asked softly. I'm fine," Yu Yan replied. Her face was slightly red, and she quietly took a small step back. Being so close to Li Daocheng actually made her heart beat faster. She lowered her head and stuttered, "Li Daocheng, no, Senior Li, I can't afford to be called Commander Yu." Let's change the way you address me. Just call me Yu Yan. Li Daochong looked at Yu Yan, who had suddenly changed her personality, in surprise. This was not her usual style. It's just a form of address. Don't mind it. Li Daochong smiled. Killing Ming Mo seniorly. Such a feat, let alone the Shenghua Federation, would be a proud achievement even in the three great cultivation empires. It's enough to be recorded in the annals of history. If Yu Yan has offended seniorly in any way in the past, please forgive her. Yu Yan apologizes again. Yu Yan said seriously. Li Daochong scratched his head. He was really not used to facing such a Yu Yan. Commander Yu, you should just call me Xiaochong. What Senior Li or Senior Zhang? Let's not talk about that. In terms of age, I should call you Big Sister. No, you've already stepped into the Yuanying realm, and your combat strength is outstanding. How can I, Yu Yan, be your big sister? Yu Yan hurriedly said. I only sent you a message on Kangwu planet, and you rushed over to help me without a second word. When you scared away those bastards from the Xiao family, you were already my big sister. Li Daochong smiled. Yu Yan still wanted to say something, but before she could open her mouth, a finger covered it. Li Daochong looked at Yu Yan with a smile and said, Big sister you have to keep what happened today a secret for me. You saw it too. I didn't kill Ming Mo with my own strength. It was just a trick. If word gets out, I'll be in danger. The Hades might send a powerful assassin to kill me. The moment that finger touched Yu Yan's lips, her delicate body trembled as if she had been electrocuted. As for what Li Daochong said, Yu Yan didn't understand. She just nodded blankly. Boom! A loud sound rang out. Yu Yan was so scared that she shuddered. The stone door trembled violently. The three demonic dwellers outside were still attacking the stone door. At this moment, the stone door was obviously shaking more violently than before, as if it could collapse at any time. We can't stay here for long. Let's go. Li Daochong looked at the stone door, grabbed Yu Yan's hand and flew into the tunnel. Genius memorized this address in a second. Mobile version of reading website. Chapter 498. Li Daochong flew into the tunnel with Yu Yan, then closed the door. On the other end of the tunnel, Cherry Blossom Gauze looked at Li Daochong in shock. She couldn't hide the embarrassment on her greenish-gray face. An hour ago, Cherry Blossom Gauze was definitely stronger than Li Daochong. Now it was hard to say. Li Daochong's aura was completely different from before. He had broken through to the Yuanying realm during the battle with Devil Blade. Li Daochong was already ridiculously strong when he was in the Jin Dan realm. Cherry Blossom Gauze didn't know how strong he could be after breaking through to the next realm. When Devil Blade was killed, Li Daochong's sword aura was much stronger, and he managed to kill Devil Blade with a single strike. Even though Devil Blade was weakened, his demonic body was still there. He couldn't withstand Li Daochong's strike. Cherry Blossom Gauze felt a chill run down her spine, causing the wound on her back to hurt even more. Her beautiful face twisted uncontrollably. Li Daochong came in front of Cherry Blossom Gauze and looked at her. Wu Ho, who had always been insufferably arrogant, felt like she was sitting on pins and needles. Her heart was in a mess, and she felt extremely uneasy. Cherry Blossom Gauze felt like her life was no longer in her hands. Whoosh! A black light flashed, and the Tsang ink saber appeared. It hovered beside Li Daochong, emitting a cold light. It stared at Cherry Blossom Gauze like a ferocious beast. You want to kill me? Cherry Blossom Gauze asked, holding her breath. What else can I do? Li Daochong replied calmly. Cherry Blossom Gauze bit her lower lip hard. Her already pale lips were like wax paper. If it weren't for Cherry Blossom Gauze's beauty, her ashen face would have been frightening. Are you sure you can kill me? Cherry Blossom Gauze's eyes were filled with determination. About 70%, Li Daochong said confidently. So you're saying that you're not completely confident that you can kill me? Cherry Blossom Gauze's eyes flickered. No. Li Daochong told the truth. He wasn't sure if Cherry Blossom Gauze had any other trump cards. Li Daochong didn't believe that Cherry Blossom Gauze didn't have any life-saving trump card. If that's the case, why are you taking the risk? This queen will never go back on her word. There are still 3 demons outside. If we work together, we'll have a greater chance of escaping. Cherry Blossom Gauze's nervousness eased slightly. The fact that Li Daochong was willing to talk to her meant that he didn't want to kill her. Otherwise, there was no need for him to waste time talking to her. Tell me, how do we escape? Li Daochong asked with interest. Only Li Daochong knew about the other escape route in this base. Cherry Blossom Gauze didn't know about it. But since she said so, it meant that she had her own plans. Li Daochong's eyes flickered. There were multiple plans and multiple paths to choose from. It was better to have 2 paths than one. This queen has a short-distance teleportation technique. It can teleport you 10,000 kilometers away in an instant, Cherry Blossom Gauze said bluntly. Sounds pretty good. Li Daochong rubbed his chin. But you didn't use it for so long. It seems that this technique isn't simple. What are the conditions? Li Daochong hit the nail on the head. Cherry Blossom Gauze's eyes flashed red. The calmer Li Daochong appeared, the greater the pressure she felt. The great Wu Ho was actually intimidated by a young human practitioner. She couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. This queen has been infected by demonic energy. My injuries are very serious. I need to expel the demonic energy from my body before I can use this technique, Cherry Blossom Gauze said bluntly. As expected. Li Daochong had expected this. So you want Mr. Li to heal you? Li Daochong's tone carried a hint of playfulness. If it's possible, Cherry Blossom Gauze said. I can heal you. However, Mr. Li has a condition. If you agree, I won't kill you. I'll heal you and we'll escape together. If you don't agree, then there's no point in keeping you alive. Li Daochong sounded as if he was chatting with someone on the street. His tone was calm and emotionless. But in Cherry Blossom Gauze's ears, it sounded even more terrifying than his furious roar. Li Daochong wasn't joking. Cherry Blossom Gauze even felt that if she said no, Li Daochong would immediately attack her and kill her with lightning speed. 70% confidence. This brat is just deliberately mystifying me. He wants me to lower my guard. In reality, he's already 100% confident. Whenever Luo Yingsha thought about the lightning that shot out from Li Daochong's eyes and the sword light that contained a mysterious intent realm, she immediately felt uncomfortable and shuddered. Cherry Blossom Gauze was at an absolute disadvantage. She had no choice. In fact, even if Li Daochong didn't threaten Cherry Blossom Gauze, she was already at her wits' end. She couldn't return to Rakshasa state. These demons were here to capture her. Xing Paoluo had already betrayed her. He wanted to use her as a bargaining chip to make a deal with the Netherworld to ensure that the Rakshasa state could exist for a longer time. What Xing Paoluo needed the most now was time. As long as the powerful Netherworld didn't attack him, he could hold on for a while longer. Then he would have more time to cultivate. Xing Paoluo had suppressed himself for so long just to become a demon in the end. Cherry Blossom Gauze sneered inwardly. Xing Paoluo didn't hesitate to betray her in order to become a demon. Since that was the case, she had nothing to worry about. Cherry Blossom Gauze pondered for a moment. She looked up at Li Daochong and nodded slightly. What's your condition? As long as it's within this queen's capabilities, I'll agree to it. Li Daochong smiled but didn't say anything. He slowly raised a hand and placed it on Cherry Blossom Gauze's shoulder. The latter wanted to dodge, but under Li Daochong's pressure, she could only remain motionless. Of course you can do it. I want to plant a restriction in your soul and make you my servant. How about it? Li Daochong said calmly. He seemed to be discussing, but his calm tone carried an unquestionable attitude. Cherry Blossom Gauze's body trembled. She didn't expect Li Daochong's condition to be like this. She was so close to making a move. Hearing this request, Cherry Blossom Gauze almost lost her rationality. However, when she met Li Daocheng's gaze, she immediately cowered. Cherry Blossom Gauze clearly saw the lightning flash in Li Daocheng's eyes. Yang lightning, the nemesis of all things in the netherworld. Wu Ho was no exception. The lightning energy that Li Daocheng released during the Jin Dan stage couldn't be underestimated. It was able to injure Cherry Blossom Gauze. Now that he had advanced to the Yuanying stage, how much stronger would his lightning energy be? Are you unwilling? Seeing that Cherry Blossom Gauze didn't reply, Li Daocheng raised his eyebrows and asked. Cherry Blossom Gauze still didn't reply. There wasn't much emotion on her face. Only her white teeth bit down on her lower lip. Her lips were pale, and her gaze was mournful. Wu Ho wanted to become the servant of a human cultivator? If she agreed, it would be a great humiliation. If she didn't agree, she would most likely be killed. Cherry Blossom Gauze's ghostly energy stirred. It wanted to erupt. However, just as she circulated her ghostly energy, her chest felt like it was being overturned. Pooh! She spat out a mouthful of blood. Fortunately, Li Daocheng dodged quickly. Otherwise, his face would have been covered in blood. Don't struggle. If you had fought Li to the death just now, you might have had a chance. However, it's impossible now. I've already locked onto your wizard core. Killing you is just a matter of thought. Li Daocheng's tone became serious for the first time. A murderous aura rose from his body. Cherry Blossom Gauze's beautiful eyes widened. She immediately used her inner vision. Just as she did so, her death intent was immediately reflected. The world in her body was no longer under her control. You! Cherry Blossom Gauze was so angry that her entire body trembled. Don't use you. It's so impolite. I'm going to be your master soon. You don't have to call me master. However, you should at least call me Mr. Li Daocheng said disapprovingly. Cherry Blossom Gauze's eyes flickered slightly. A layer of tears appeared in her eyes. She was actually being bullied by Li Daocheng to the point of crying. If the higher-ups of Rakshasa State saw Cherry Blossom Gauze's current state, they would definitely be shocked. That was Wu Ho. She killed people without batting an eyelid. She spoke and did things based on what she liked. As long as she didn't like someone, she would kill them. At this moment, Cherry Blossom Gauze's eyes were filled with tears. This was even rarer than the sun rising from the west. Everyone kicks a man who is down. When one is unlucky, one's teeth will be stuffed even when one drinks water. Cherry Blossom Gauze experienced this situation at this moment. She could be captured, killed, or become Li Daocheng's servant. There were 3 options for her to choose from. No matter how she looked at it, becoming a servant was the best choice. However, once Li Daocheng planted a restriction in her soul, her life would be completely in the hands of Li Daocheng. No matter how powerful she was, she could only be controlled by Li Daocheng. However, the other 2 options would lead to her death. All right, I agree. Cherry Blossom Gauze mustered up her courage and said. Cherry Blossom Gauze's pride as a superior collapsed in an instant. An indescribable bitter smile appeared on her face. As soon as Cherry Blossom Gauze finished speaking, Li Daocheng's spiritual energy and telekinesis entered Cherry Blossom Gauze's body at the same time. In that instant, Cherry Blossom Gauze shuddered. The way she looked at Li Daocheng changed, as if she had seen her natural enemy. An irresistible natural enemy. It was like a sheep meeting a fierce tiger. As for why she felt this natural sense of fear, Luo Yingsha couldn't figure it out, and a confused expression appeared on her beautiful face. Li Daocheng quickly found Cherry Blossom Gauze's which core and which blood essence. He had to plant a restriction in these 2 core areas. 2 wisps of yang lightning spiritual thought field entered the witch core and witch blood essence. The deepest parts of these 2 areas were Cherry Blossom Gauze's weakest parts. Li Daocheng had occupied them. If necessary, Li Daocheng could destroy Cherry Blossom Gauze with a single thought and make her disappear from the world. After planting the restriction, Li Daochong didn't stop. He immediately started healing Cherry Blossom Gauze. A large amount of spiritual energy surged into Cherry Blossom Gauze's body, quickly expelling or destroying the demonic aura. The terrifying wound on Cherry Blossom Gauze's back quickly healed after the demonic aura dissipated. It was as good as new in a short while, not leaving a single scar. It was impossible to tell that such a large wound had once been there. Cherry Blossom Gauze's greenish-gray face quickly faded. It returned to its original pale and bewitching appearance. Cherry Blossom Gauze, who had completely recovered, no longer had her previous arrogance. Her cold expression disappeared, replaced by a trace of gentleness. People had to lower their heads when they were under someone else's roof. The lofty Wu Ho also understood this principle. Cherry Blossom Gauze needed some time to adapt to the change in role, position, and mentality. However, she didn't need to adapt to the sudden fear of Li Daochong. After experiencing it, it was deeply imprinted in her soul. It couldn't be erased. It was as if she had been born with it. "You may begin." Li Daochong's voice sounded faintly. "Yes, Mr. Li." Cherry Blossom Gauze replied stiffly. Then, she threw out a dozen bamboo-like rods. There were 15 rods in total. They were 1 meter long and less than 2 inches in diameter. Each rod was divided into 6 sections. Dark soul void bamboo? Yu Yen, who had been standing silently at the side, suddenly exclaimed in surprise. "Little girl, you know what's good for you." Cherry Blossom Gauze glanced at Yu Yen. The way she spoke was completely different from when she spoke to Li Daochong. She still spoke in a condescending manner. Genius memorized this site's address in 1 second. Mobile version of reading website. Chapter 499. Cherry Blossom Gauze had recovered more than half of her spiritual energy. She arranged the Netherworld Soul Void Bamboo, and a small teleportation array was immediately formed. Li Daochong and Yu Yen stood at the side and watched quietly. Cherry Blossom Gauze chanted in the Netherworld language, which was faint and ethereal. After a few minutes, Cherry Blossom Gauze was sweating profusely. She seemed to have used up a lot of energy. She exhaled and said, "Mr. Li, the teleportation array has been set up. We can start the teleportation now." Li Daochong nodded and said, "Don't worry. Can this teleportation array teleport you to the designated area?" Cherry Blossom Gauze replied, "Yes, as long as it's within the maximum distance, I can teleport you to any place I've been." Li Daochong thought for a moment and said, "Then let's teleport you to Demon Subduing City." Cherry Blossom Gauze was stunned. Demon Subduing City? "Mr. Li, Demon Subduing City is less than 2,000 kilometers away from here. Isn't that too close?" Li Daochong's expression was slightly cold. He glanced at Cherry Blossom Gauze coldly. "Don't ask me any questions. Pay attention to your status. If there's a next time, you'll be punished." Cherry Blossom Gauze had never been treated like this before. She was furious, but she didn't dare to show it. "Understood, Mr. Li. I'll pay attention." "Okay." Li Daochong replied and turned to look at the other end of the passage. Under the continuous bombardment of the 3 demons, the stone gate was on the verge of collapse. It could collapse at any time. Boom! Another loud sound rang out. Li Daochong's Tai Chi pattern shone in his palm. He raised 2 fingers and stared at the stone gate. Cherry Blossom Gauze's heart skipped a beat. She finally understood Li Daochong's intention. Obviously, he wanted to leave a big gift for the 3 demons before he left. Time passed bit by bit. Li Daochong did not know what was going on in the Demon Subduing City. But as long as nothing unexpected happened, the 120,000 level 12 talismans should be able to stop the ghost army, as long as no dark ghost on the level of Wu Ho appeared. Wu Ho had been subdued and was no longer a threat. The 3 demon dwellers outside the door were currently the biggest threat. Yu Yen nervously looked in the direction of the stone door. Her heart was restless. Even though Li Daochong was there, she still felt uneasy. The nether devil was too terrifying, so much so that when she sensed the devil chi, her heart would turn cold. Boom! With a loud bang, the stone door of the spirit seed star finally could not hold on any longer and collapsed. At the same time, Li Daochong performed the first move of great void swordsmanship without any hesitation. Begin the teleportation. Li Daochong shouted at the same time as he released the sword beam. Cherry Blossom Gauze was already prepared and immediately activated the teleportation array. With a swoosh, Li Daochong, Cherry Blossom Gauze and Yu Yen disappeared. When they were teleported away, the underworld soul void bamboo on the ground disintegrated and disappeared. The moment the door opened, the three nether devils who had broken through the door saw Li Daochong and the other two standing at the other end of the tunnel, looking at them. The three demon dwellers used their fastest speed to fly towards Li Daochong and the other two. However, the moment they entered the tunnel, they were blocked by the powerful spiritual light cannons that shot out from all directions. Immediately after, two sword beams flashed over. Li Daochong, Cherry Blossom Gauze and the female cultivator instantly disappeared. Fei Lian let out an earth-shaking roar. "Cherry Blossom Gauze, don't run." His voice reverberated throughout the tunnel. Before he finished speaking, two sword beams flashed by. Seeing Cherry Blossom Gauze escape, Fei Lian was enraged and vented his anger on the two sword beams that shot over. Whoosh, Poochie, one of Fei Lian's arms flew into the sky and was instantly cut off by the sword beams. "What?" the two demon dwellers exclaimed in shock. Fei Lian's eyes widened as he stared in disbelief at the arm that had been cut off from his body and flipped in the air. Fei Lian stretched out his hand to grab the arm, but he grabbed nothing but air. Bang! That arm instantly exploded and turned into a cloud of black blood mist before disappearing. The cut on Fei Lian's shoulder emitted a layer of green smoke and sparks of electricity, but it was quickly burnt to a crisp. No matter how much Fei Lian tried to use his demonic chi to heal the wound, it was completely ineffective. The two sword beams not only cut off Fei Lian's arm, but also his demonic artifact in two and flew in a straight line. Everything in this straight line was sliced apart. Even the aura of death would be sliced apart and dissipated. Everything that came into contact with the sword light would immediately turn into ashes. When the giant man and Black Lotus saw this scene, they were shocked. "Lord Fei Lian, could that sword beam have been released by a void-tempering stage immortal?" The demon dweller swallowed his saliva with difficulty and instantly lost the desire to continue chasing. Void-tempering stage immortals were on par with underworld devils, but once a human cultivator reached this stage, their strength would increase exponentially and they would be able to use all kinds of divine abilities. Furthermore, they would be able to send their primordial spirit out of their body and create another clone that was on par with their original body. It was almost impossible to kill a void-tempering stage immortal. Even underworld devils would find it difficult to kill a void-tempering stage immortal. Once a human cultivator reached the void-tempering stage, they would have the ability to slay underworld devils. However, there were very few void-tempering stage immortals in the human race. In the vast spirit realm that was ruled by the human race, there were so many humans that it was impossible to calculate a complete number. However, even with such a huge base, the number of cultivators who could reach the void-tempering stage among the hundreds of millions of humans was less than 1,000,000. This number seemed to be quite large, but the base number was in the hundreds of millions. After conversion, the probability was indescribably small. It was much smaller than a low-grade dwarf ghost evolving into an underworld devil. Only after reaching the void-tempering stage could one truly break through the void and shatter a star with a palm strike. Fei Lian looked at his lost arm with a trace of doubt and confusion on his ferocious face. Of course, there was more resentment. "Cherry Blossom Gauze has betrayed us. The mission has failed. Quickly report to His Highness. Let's go." Fei Lian felt a trace of the power of law condensing. The shackles that sealed the devil chi in his body began to loosen. For some reason, the time they could stay was shortened. If they did not leave now, the three of them would attract the 9 heavens' primordial lightning. The demon dwellers, Black Lotus, and Failien had no choice but to fly towards a black cloud in the sky and disappear into it. A few streaks of black lightning flashed through the clouds and disappeared with a bang. Northwest, stronghold of demon subduing city. After more than a dozen rounds of talismans, the hundreds of thousands of ghost soldiers were utterly defeated. Thousands of level 12 talismans were fired at the same time. The power was earth-shattering. The Wu ghosts could not withstand the concentrated attacks. Intercourse stood on the black cloud and looked down. Wu Ho's aura had mysteriously disappeared just now. This made him feel a chill in the bottom of his heart. However, without Wu Ho's instructions, Intercourse did not dare to withdraw his troops. He could only brace himself and let the ghost army continue to charge. He could only watch helplessly as the underworld ghosts were reduced to dust by the talismans. Outside the northwest stronghold, ghost beast corpses were piled up like mountains. Rotten dragons, Balrog crocodiles, and even minotaurs' corpses were scattered everywhere. The morale of the human cultivator army was greatly boosted. Tens of thousands of cultivators were restless, ready to attack at any time. A row of spirit light cannons were fired. Qin Zhan gave the order to attack. 70,000 cultivators soared into the sky like a tide, sweeping up the remaining ghost army in one fell swoop. Ning Shijie, Xiao Ying, and Ling Fei led the entire army. Each of them carried 3 level 12 talismans. As they charged into the ghost army, the talismans once again exploded. The sounds of battle shook the heavens and multicolored light shone everywhere. The remaining ghost army was mostly scared out of their wit. The low-level underworld ghosts scattered in all directions, utterly defeated. Only the ghost army of soul-catcher ghosts and above were still fighting. Although their combat strength was great, 2 fists were no match for 4 hands. Under the siege, they were constantly killed. However, the thousands of Wu ghosts showed their strength in hand-to-hand combat. In addition, there were more than 10 Grand Wizard ghosts. The cultivator army did not obtain an overwhelming advantage. Qin Zhan held Zhan Lu. The victorious army swept through the army with penetrating rainbow. Chu Tianqi flew through the air, and Kong Lanxin fought the Grand Wizard with her greatsword. The 2 sides entered the final battle. The long-range cultivators in the stronghold with talismans supported the combat cultivators from time to time. Only then could they barely be evenly matched with the Wu Ghost army. Chu Tianqi, Kong Lanxin, the victorious army, Qin Zhan, and goddess Hong Yang. More than 10 Yuanying cultivators resisted the attacks of the Grand Wizard Ghost. After the stalemate lasted for half an hour, the cultivator army began to gradually lose their support. The Grand Wizard Ghosts kept releasing underworld technique. The powerful underworld techniques caused great damage to the cultivator army. The 70,000 cultivator army soldiers fell one after another in the battle. The cultivator army began to shrink back. At this moment, a brilliance flashed on the dilapidated street in the distance. Li Daochong, Cherry Blossom Gauze, and Yu Yen appeared on the street. Cherry Blossom Gauze's appearance changed a little. Her clothes were also changed into a male uniform of the Federation Cultivator Army. The ghostly aura on her body completely disappeared. What she emitted was actually spiritual energy. It was Li Daochong's request to disguise Cherry Blossom Gauze. Everyone in the Northwest Stronghold had seen her appearance. If she didn't change her appearance, who knew what would happen? Li Daochong couldn't openly bring Cherry Blossom Gauze with him. No one would believe that he had enslaved Wu Ho. Li Daochong was too lazy to explain. He had his own reasons for enslaving Cherry Blossom Gauze. In fact, for the past year, Li Daochong had been laying out his own forces. It was just that he had been casting his net and hadn't gathered them yet. How could Li Daochong refuse a subordinate of Cherry Blossom Gauze's level? However, it was still a little troublesome to bring her back to the Federation. He had to change her appearance first. Cherry Blossom Gauze's current male military uniform was Yu Yan's idea. It just so happened that she had several sets of military uniforms with her. Li Qian. Li Daochong. She can still fool around on 13 Specter in this appearance, but once she leaves this place, I'm afraid it'll be difficult to completely conceal her ghostly aura. Yu Yan sized up Cherry Blossom Gauze and said, "Let's leave it at that for now. I'll probably stay on 13 Specter for a while. I'll think of something else when I return." Li Daochong looked at the fierce battle between the Ghost Army and the Cultivator Army in the distance. "Sakura, come with me to kill the Grand Wizard." Li Daochong looked at the sky and said. Cherry Blossom Gauze was stunned. She had a problem with Li Daochong calling her Sakura, but she didn't dare to disobey. "Yes, Mr. Li." Cherry Blossom Gauze lowered her head and replied. Genius memorized this site's address in 1 second. Mobile version of reading website. Chapter 500. With a swoosh, Li Daochong flew into the sky. Cherry Blossom Gauze glanced at Yu Yan and instantly followed Li Daochong into the sky. Yu Yan was a little uncomfortable. Compared to these two, her speed was laughable. However, she still followed. In the void, Goddess Hong Yang was facing 2 Grand Wizards. She was having a hard time. If it wasn't for the support of the Spirit Sniper, she would have been defeated long ago. However, when the 3rd Grand Wizard joined in, Goddess Hong Yang couldn't hold on even with the support of the Spirit Sniper. Bang! Goddess Hong Yang suffered a heavy blow from the back and fell to the ground like a meteorite. A Grand Wizard appeared on the ground with a sinister smile. The black soul-devouring spear in his hand stabbed at the falling goddess Hong Yang. Hong Yang! Qin Zhan and the victorious army exclaimed at the same time when they saw this scene. Die! The Grand Wizard on the ground shouted eerily. Whoosh! Tsang Ink's blade suddenly flashed. The Grand Wizard was dumbfounded. A crack appeared on his head and dark green blood flowed out. Bang! The Grand Wizard's head exploded from the inside out. Swoosh! 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 The blade flashed in all directions. The headless body was cut into dozens of pieces. All of them exploded into a bloody mist and dissipated in the air. Li Daochong. Cries of surprise came from different directions. Everyone thought that Li Daochong was killed by Wu Ho. However, this guy appeared unscathed and instantly killed a Grand Wizard. Everyone's mouth was wide open in shock. Just when everyone's attention was on Li Daochong, screams came from the void. 3 Grand Wizard ghosts were instantly killed by an unfamiliar officer who suddenly appeared with a long sword in his hand. After Li Daochong killed the Grand Wizard, he stretched out his hand and an invisible force extended out and caught the falling goddess Hong Yang. Li Daochong. Goddess Hong Yang, who thought that she was going to die, saw Li Daochong as soon as she landed. She looked at Li Daochong in astonishment. Li Daochong nodded slightly and didn't say anything. He immediately rushed into the sky and a green light shot into the void. Tsang Ink's blade flashed across the sky. The arrogant Grand Wizard ghosts were like a group of wild chickens under Li Daochong's blade. They could be killed at any time. After Li Daochong and Cherry Blossom Gauze attacked, more than a dozen Grand Wizard ghosts were all killed in 2 or 3 minutes. The notifications in the depths of Li Daochong's mind kept making cheerful beeping sounds. They kept reminding him that he had killed the Grand Wizard ghosts, obtained soul power, and converted spiritual energy. The spiritual energy in Li Daochong's body kept increasing. The great void swordsmanship, used to harass the 3 demons just now actually consumed a lot of his spiritual energy. Now that he had finished replenishing all his spiritual energy, Li Daochong felt indescribably carefree. The Grand Wizard ghosts were vulnerable in front of Li Daochong and Cherry Blossom Gauze. Needless to say, the witch ghosts could be killed in 1 strike. Intercourse on the black cloud, when he saw Li Daochong appear, he ran away immediately. Wu Ho's breath was gone, and Li Daochong appeared again. The result seemed self-evident. Xiang, you might not believe that the Witch Empress was killed by Li Daochong, but it was a fact that the Witch Empress vanished and the Witch Empress reappeared. Intercourse had wanted to run away for a long time, but he didn't dare to because of Wu Ho's deterrence. Now he couldn't care so much. His life was more important. In fact, Li Daochong didn't forget intercourse. He just let him go on purpose because Chu Qianwei still needed him. Subduing cherry blossom gauze was also to help Chu Qianwei. Chu Qianwei's plan was progressing bit by bit. Li Daochong looked in the direction of intercourse's escape and smiled. If it wasn't for intercourse, cherry blossom gauze wouldn't have come to 13 Specter. Chu Qianwei had already revealed some of her secret plan to Li Daochong in the haunted house on Red Sun Planet. Li Daochong already knew that cherry blossom gauze had spectral vitality, but he didn't know the details. The real reason why Rakshasa State suddenly attacked Xinghua Federation was that Jiuyou State's Gehenna clan suddenly put pressure on Xing Paoluo. Xing Paoluo had to take action to show his determination, and the initiator of all this was Chu Qianwei. Not long ago, she revealed the secret of cherry blossom gauze to Gehenna clan's Prince Qi Jiang. Qi Jiang, who had been unable to break through the great devil body, had been looking for a catalyst to cultivate. Spectral vitality was the best choice. As for the Rakshasa essence, it was just an excuse. Although Chu Qianwei had revealed some information to Li Daochong didn't know how to operate and when to start. He only knew that Chu Qianwei had been secretly planning the decisive battle between the Rakshasa State and the Federation. First, get rid of cherry blossom gauze and then deal with Xing Paoluo. Killing Xing Paoluo was almost the only purpose of Chu Qianwei's life. Li Daochong looked at the devastated city of demons subduing below. The ground was scorched and stained with blood. The war between two different races, if there was no winner, it would probably never end. If they didn't invade the spiritual realm, the Hades would become weaker and weaker until they finally perished. If the last race of the spiritual realm, the human race, was defeated, the entire spiritual realm would become a ranch for the Hades. From then on, all the creatures in the spiritual realm would become pigs, horses, cattle, and sheep for the ghost devils of the Hades to be slaughtered and enjoyed. This kind of irreconcilable relationship. It was really nerve-wracking. Li Daochong's eyes were calm, but his heart was turbulent. This was a war that neither side could afford to lose. But in the end, one side would be defeated. However, the current Li Daochong was still unable to influence the war between the two worlds, but he had the initial capital to protect himself. Yuanying's current combat strength was close to that of the semi-god realm, and he even had the initial combat strength of a semi-god realm cultivator. Li Daochong floated in the center of the void, and a meridian was gradually becoming clearer. This trip to 13 Specter made him understand the cruelty of war. The seemingly peaceful rear of the Federation was actually not stable at all, and it could be overturned at any time. If it weren't for his unexpected appearance this time, the Rakshasa State might not be able to take down the Xinghua Federation, but 13 Specter would definitely be taken down. This disorderly planet with no orbit would be an important stronghold for the Rakshasa State to attack the Federation. After that, the Federation would no longer be safe, and all kinds of ghosts might appear in the Central Star region. When that time came, it would really be a night of ghosts, and no one would have a day of peace. Li Daochong looked at the ghost army that was still struggling in the void, and a cold light shot out from his eyes, as if he could see the situation of these ghosts entering the star region behind them. Without the Grand Wizard Ghost, the remaining ghost army, including the Wu Gui, could no longer cause any trouble. Although the Wu Gui was also very powerful, in the face of several peak Yuanying cultivators, numbers were not of much use, and there was also the spirit sniper's cold shots. More and more Wu Gui were killed, and in a short while, the 1,000 Wu Gui were reduced by half. The Wu Gui was also afraid of death, and without a leader, The remaining Wu Gui were no longer in the mood to continue fighting, and they all scattered and fled. As a result, the remaining ghost army was unable to withstand a single blow, and the remaining 30,000 cultivators went on a killing spree. In this battle, the Rakshasa state lost close to 300,000 soldiers, including more than 10 grand wizard ghosts, nearly 600 Wu Gui, and more than 300 ghost beasts. Although the northwest stronghold had won, it was still a Pyrrhic victory. A total of 80,000 cultivators had died here, and their corpses and souls could only be buried and drifted on this scorched earth. The amount of strategic resources that had been consumed was countless. Hundreds of millions of elementary spirit stones had been burned to ashes, and millions of intermediate spirit stones had been turned into dust. As for other resources, they were about a few million intermediate spirit stones. War, in a sense, was burning money. The news of Wu Ho's disappearance quickly spread. After the ghost army that attacked the demon-subduing city found out, they all retreated. The northwest stronghold sent out the Spirit Talisman Brigade to clean up the demon-subduing city and eliminate the remaining nether ghosts. The news of the victory of the demon-subduing city's defense was immediately spread to the Central Star region. The haze that had been floating above everyone's heads in the Shenghua Federation for the past month was finally swept away. The major media outlets on the Federation's spirit net immediately exploded. We won, salute the most lovely person. First couplet. Qin Shizhua is a godlike soldier, and he also has the divine general and the heavenly soldier, the two swords are in harmony. Second couplet. 13 Specter shocks the heavens and the earth, shaking the ghost army under the demon-subduing city. Horizontal scroll. Show our military might. The demon-subduing city's defense will definitely be recorded in the annals of history. This battle has made us safer. Let those damned nether ghosts get out. For a time, news of victory came one after another, and all kinds of articles were scattered in every corner of the Federation like snowflakes. The people were excited, and the government and military were not idle either. They immediately awarded military merits to the soldiers who participated in the defense of the demon-subduing city, and the exiled cultivators who participated in the battle were pardoned. As for the name Li Daochong, it was not mentioned. It was not that people ignored it, but that it was not mentioned in the report. This was Li Daochong's own intention. Qin Zhan originally wanted to take this opportunity to make Li Daochong an important member of the army, but he was rejected by Li Daochong. However, Li Daochong knew that it was impossible for him to keep a low profile. The soldiers of the demon-subduing city had all seen it, and there were also people from the Divine General Group. At most, he could only hide it from the public. As for the higher-ups of the Federation, they definitely could not hide it. The representatives of the media were Qin Zhan, the victorious army Chu Tianqi, Kong Lanxin, and the goddess Hong Yang. These 5 people became heroes in the hearts of the people of the Federation. However, in the demon-subduing city, there was only one person who was regarded as a hero, and that was Li Daochong. Li Daochong repeatedly refused, but was still dragged by Qin Zhan and Yu Yen to participate in the celebration banquet. Fortunately, the scale of the celebration banquet was not large, and only dozens of people with high positions and achievements in the Northwest stronghold attended. The process was also relatively simple. In fact, the main purpose was to express their gratitude to Li Daochong. Chu Tianqi and Kong Lanxin changed their attitude when they came and drank with Li Daochong. Li Daochong naturally did not care about the previous misunderstanding. They also mistakenly thought that he was a witch cultivator, so they were hostile, not deliberately looking for trouble. The victorious army was forthright. He pulled Li Daochong and drank 3 large cups of spirit wine in a row. After 3 rounds of drinking, his temper rose and he actually defeated Li Daochong as his big brother. Several people tried to stop the victorious army, but they could not stop him. In public, they kowtowed to Li Daochong and served tea, calling him master. Li Daochong looked at the drunken state of the victorious army and did not know whether to laugh or cry. He agreed as if he was coaxing a child, mainly because he was afraid that this honest old boy would do something else. However, the one who really gave Li Daochong a headache was not the victorious army, but the goddess Hong Yang. This female cultivator of the Bright Crown Federation, Yuanying, drank too much and became drunk. However, unlike the victorious army, this fairy did not look drunk on the surface until after the banquet ended. She actually sneaked into Li Daochong's room and lay on Li Daochong's bed and slept soundly. Genius remembered this site's address in a second. Mobile version of reading website, M. Chapter 501. That night, Li Daochong drank quite a bit. Alcohol tolerance was directly related to one's cultivation. Li Daochong's alcohol tolerance wasn't bad. Now that he was in the Yuanying stage, drinking a barrel of ordinary spirit wine wouldn't be a problem. However, what Qin Zhan took out tonight was the Raging Flames wine that he had kept for more than 30 years. Those who couldn't handle alcohol would fall unconscious with just one sip. If you weren't in the Foundation establishment realm, you shouldn't touch this wine. One drop could make you sleep for 3 days and 3 nights. Of course, it could be diluted with water before drinking. 1 drop could be diluted into a barrel. Even ordinary people could drink some. Moreover, it had the effect of strengthening the body and prolonging life. If a Foundation establishment realm cultivator drank a little, not only could it promote blood circulation and refresh the mind, but it could also increase their cultivation and even stimulate their potential. The Raging Flames wine was a kind of spirit wine that had the effect of spirit medicine. However, this thing couldn't be drunk too much. If one drank too much, they would feel extremely uncomfortable. A caddy of Raging Flames wine cost more than 10,000 elementary spirit stones on the market. Ordinary people couldn't afford it. Only cultivators could afford it. Moreover, the longer the Raging Flames wine was sealed, the stronger its effect would be. There were more than 100 kinds of spirit rice and spirit herbs used to brew this wine. They had to be put together in a certain ratio to ferment. Only top-grade alchemists and above could brew it. Simply put, the Raging Flames wine's position in the Federation was similar to Maotai in our hearts. The annual production of Raging Flames wine was extremely limited. However, it had been produced for thousands of years. It was a kind of top-grade spirit wine unique to the Federation. The Raging Flames wine that Qin Zhan took out was much better than the ordinary version that cost tens of thousands of elementary spirit stones on the market. In addition, it had been stored for more than 30 years. There were more than 100 jugs, and almost half of them were drunk at the celebration party. Each jug weighed 5 kilograms. If it was any other time, Qin Zhan would be heartbroken to see so much of his favorite wine being drunk. However, he was happy today. Not to mention drinking half. Even if Qin Zhan drank all of it, he wouldn't even frown. However, drinking all of it was unrealistic. There were only 50 people at the celebration party. On average, each person drank 5 kilograms. Half of the 50-odd people were Foundation establishment cultivators, so they couldn't drink much at all. Even if they wanted to, they didn't have the ability to. Among the remaining 30 people, half of them were Jin Dan cultivators. Although Jin Dan cultivators had a much higher tolerance for this kind of aged Raging Flames brew than Foundation establishment cultivators, being able to drink 1 or 2 caddies of it was already considered a huge amount. At the very most, it would be good if this group of people could drink 7 or 8 jars. The remaining 40 jars were all drunk by Yuanying cultivators. Because there were people constantly toasting Li Daochong, he drank 3 or 4 jars by himself. The victorious troops were ferocious people, and so was their drinking style. They were all holding jars and toasting to everyone. Yuanying's peak cultivation base gave him a lot of support. But in the end, after drinking 5 jars, he still couldn't handle the alcohol and went crazy. In front of everyone, He knelt down and acknowledged Li Daochong as his master. Everyone didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The two divine generals, Chu Tianqi and Kong Lanxin, also had a high tolerance for alcohol. While their cultivation bases were high, they had always enjoyed the best treatment in the Federation. Raging Flames Brew was the national wine that they usually drank. Although most of the time, the wine they drank wasn't as good as the one Qin Zhan brought out this time, they were still members of the Raging Flames Brew family. After drinking a lot, their tolerance for alcohol was naturally better than others. Chu Tianqi toasted Li Daochong 3 times as an apology. He apologized for his previous attitude of not knowing right from wrong. Although Yu Yan's cultivation base wasn't high, and she was only at the Jin Dan stage, her tolerance for alcohol was definitely one of the best among cultivators of the same level. After adapting, Yu Yan's reverence for Li Daochong had mostly dissipated, and she gradually recovered her previous flirtatious attitude. Of course, Yu Yan now had another thought, which was to seduce Li Daochong. Such a young and talented man, which female cultivator wouldn't be tempted? Even Yu Yan found it difficult to control the thoughts that constantly sprouted in her heart. However, Yu Yan still underestimated Li Daochong's tolerance for alcohol. No matter how much a Jin Dan cultivator could drink, it couldn't be compared with Yuanying. In the end, Yu Yan was carried away from the table by 2 female cultivators. As the host, Qin Zhan naturally wouldn't neglect Li Daochong, and also drank a lot. In addition to these big shots, Qian Feng, Tang Guangbei, Fang Yuliang, and Grandma Fenghua all toasted Li Daochong one by one. As for the younger generation, Ning Xiujie, Xiao Ying, and Ling Fei, these 3 people, with an admiring attitude, toasted Li Daochong. Xiao Ying and Ling Fei both wanted to report the results of their cultivation to Li Daochong, but they knew that in this kind of occasion, it was not their turn to speak. After toasting, they obediently returned to their seats. They were invited to participate because Qin Zhan knew that they had a friendship with Li Daochong, otherwise they wouldn't be qualified to come. Li Daochong's cultivation base had now reached the level of Yuanying, and his battle prowess was even more terrifying. In the beginning, everyone held a deep reverence for him. However, after interacting with him at the banquet, Li Daochong didn't have the slightest bit of arrogance, aside from being a little reserved. He didn't have the majesty of a high-level cultivator, and was as approachable as the little brother next door. He didn't look like the high and mighty cultivator of Yuanying at all. The hearty banquet ended in a hubbub. Qin Zhan didn't dare to be too indulgent. Although they had won the battle, there were still many dark ghosts on 13 Specter, and he couldn't let his guard down. The reinforcements sent by the 3 great cultivation empires would arrive in 3 days. Qin Zhan still had to meet them and discuss the counterattack against the ghost army of 13 Specter. After the banquet ended, Li Daochong finally managed to get away and return to his room. He planned to rest for the night and consolidate his cultivation base. Li Daochong entered the room in a daze. The soft and smooth cloud silk quilt on the bed had been spread out on the bed at some point. Li Daochong didn't pay attention to this detail. He only thought that the logistics staff of the stronghold had arranged it in advance. Li Daochong sat in front of the bed and circulated the spirit energy in his body. Then, he entered a meditative state. However, the aftereffects of Blaze Brew were quite strong. Li Daochong meditated for a while before a wave of drowsiness swept over him. During this time, Li Daochong had been fighting non-stop, and his body was still a little tired. Although Yuanying cultivators didn't need to sleep to recuperate, sleep had always been the best way to recover their physical state, no matter how high their cultivation base was. Even the demons of the Hades often chose to sleep to recover. When Cherry Blossom Gauze had suffered extremely serious injuries, she had resolutely chosen to sleep among the many recovery methods. This was because this method didn't have any sequelae and could recover 100% of the time. The only drawback was that it required a very long time. Therefore, cultivators would also sleep when they needed to. Li Daocheng's drowsiness came mainly from the wine. Apart from wine, Blaze Brew was also a high-quality spiritual medicine. It could stimulate the body's potential. At this moment, Li Daocheng felt warm in his stomach. The blood in his body was warm and his body was floating. This feeling was very comfortable. Qin Zhan had told Li Daocheng that after drinking this wine, it would be best to sleep for a while. Li Daocheng simply stopped meditating and fell into a deep sleep on the bed. After an unknown period of time, Li Daocheng felt someone hugging him. Because he was sleeping so comfortably, his telekinesis field didn't detect any danger or death aura. He turned over and continued to enjoy the comfort brought by his deep sleep. Li Daocheng had a dream. In the dream, he was hugging a naked young fairy who kept talking to him. In a daze, Li Daocheng heard a clear and sweet female voice. Li Daoyu, please wait. I want to go to 13 Specter at the edge of the Hades. Can you accompany me? I'm scared. Li Daocheng closed his eyes and frowned slightly. He felt that something was wrong. Was he dreaming? But why did the voice sound so real? Li Daocheng slowly opened his eyes. The moment he opened his eyes, he was stunned. There was really a young fairy lying in his arms. It was Goddess Hong Yang. At this moment, this peak Yuanying fairy didn't look like a fairy at all. Instead, she looked more like a city beauty who had gone to a nightclub to release her stress last night. After drinking too much, she fell in love with a young man and woke up the next morning after having a one-night stand. Her hair was disheveled and she was sleeping soundly. There was even a transparent liquid flowing from the corner of her mouth. Her breathing was calm and regular. She seemed very satisfied last night. Li Daocheng's heart skipped a beat. What the hell? Puzzled, he pulled his hand out from under Goddess Hong Yang's head. Li Daocheng lowered his head and looked at his body. His clothes were neat and tidy. Nothing had happened that shouldn't have happened. When Li Daocheng looked at Goddess Hong Yang again, the latter's starry eyes were already open. She looked at Li Daocheng with a sleepy smile. Li Daoyu, did you sleep well last night? Goddess Hong Yang's face was still sleepy as she grinned. Of course I slept soundly with a beauty by my side. Li Daocheng's heart only rippled for a moment before it calmed down. Strength determined one's state of mind. If Li Daocheng was just an ordinary mortal now, even if he had experienced great storms, he would still be scared to the point of peeing his pants when he opened his eyes and saw a peak-stage Yuanying female cultivator lying next to him. Putting aside the fact that Li Daocheng had lived 2 lives, his current strength was enough to fight against high-level grand wizards or even witch empresses. His cultivation level was at the early stage of the nascent soul realm, but his combat power had reached the divine transformation realm. At different heights, one's attitude would naturally be different. Li Daocheng's heart was as calm as water. He guessed that Goddess Hong Yang most likely went to his room after drinking. As for whether it was intentional or not, he didn't know. The only thing Li Daocheng felt a little strange was that he didn't notice anyone when he entered the room. Although Li Daocheng was also drunk at that time, his powerful telekinesis field didn't decrease the sensitivity of his senses. Thinking back to last night, Li Daocheng indeed didn't sense any aura. In fact, when Goddess Hong Yang was still asleep, Li Daocheng also didn't sense any aura. It was as if when Goddess Hong Yang was asleep, there was no aura on her body, as if she didn't exist. Li Daocheng finally remembered that the cloud silk quilt on his bed last night wasn't spread out by the logistics staff. Li Daoyu, do you mind if I sleep on your bed without your permission? Goddess Hong Yang's beautiful eyes moved, and her face was lovely. Half of her exposed shoulder was as smooth as jade, and her lying posture squeezed out half of her soft bosom, which was full of temptation. As Fairy Hong Yang spoke, she seemed to unintentionally move a little. The cloud silk covering her body slid down a little, revealing nearly half of her graceful figure. The curve between her back and buttocks was soul-stirring and soul-stirring. Female cultivators with high cultivation levels had their own charming halos. With Hongyang's current posture, any ordinary person who saw her would instantly lose control of their soul. They would immediately succumb to Hongyang's extreme charm and fall in love with this fairy, agreeing to anything she wanted them to do. But to Li Daochong, who had powerful telekinesis, any kind of temptation was futile. It all depended on whether he liked it or not. Why would Mr. Li mind? I'm afraid there are countless young talents in the Federation who would fight to spend a good night with a yuanying female cultivator like you. As long as you ask, they'll bring you mountains of gold and silver. It's Mr. Li's good fortune that you can leave a fragrance on his bed. Li Daochong didn't avoid his gaze of admiring beautiful things as he examined Hong Yang's exposed body. However, there was no greed in his eyes. They were as clear as water, as if he was admiring the full moon of mid-autumn. The only thing missing was the pastries and tea. Ha ha ha! Goddess Hong Yang couldn't help but laugh. Li Daoyu, you really know how to joke. How could I be that good? I was just lucky enough to enter the yuanying. In front of you, I'm just a weak woman. Fairy, although you were drunk last night, I'm afraid you didn't enter my room by accident. If you have something to say, just say it. The faint smile on Li Daochong's handsome face suddenly disappeared, and he said seriously. Genius remembered this site's address in 1 second. Mobile reading website, M. Chapter 502. When the goddess Hong Yang heard Li Daochong's words, she looked annoyed, as if her thoughts had been seen through. She had originally planned to use her beauty to seduce Li Daochong. If she had succeeded, the goddess Hong Yang would not have minded turning the act into reality. After all, it was impossible to find such a seductive man. Unfortunately, the beauty was interested, but the seductive man did not appreciate it. It was not that Li Daochong was not interested in women, but in his current state, he was not in the mood to do so. More importantly, Li Daochong had always been thinking about a certain person. This was also the reason why he had come into contact with so many beautiful women in the world, but had no intention of doing so. The goddess Hong Yang could see that Li Daochong was not moved by her seduction. It was already so obvious, but he did not say anything. If she continued to flirt, it would be very awkward. The goddess Hong Yang curled her lips and sat up, completely ignoring the fact that she was naked. However, the moment she sat up, she had already put on a set of robes. The goddess Hong Yang looked at Li Daochong with a slightly disappointed expression and said, Li Daochong, you're really boring. I wanted to talk to you more to improve our relationship. Since you don't have that intention, I'll be frank with you. Yesterday at the banquet, that little old man Tang Guangbei said that in the Dark Soul mountain range south of 13 Specter, there is an extreme een crystal in a valley. The little old man asked me to go with him. If we find it, we can split it 50-50. What does your agreement have to do with me? Li Daochong had already guessed some clues, but he still acted as if it had nothing to do with him. The extreme een crystal was an extremely special magic metal material. Before the Hades invaded the spirit realm, this thing did not exist. It was not until an area where the aura of death and the aura of spirit intermingled that the extreme een crystal appeared. However, because the formation conditions were extremely harsh, and it took a long time to form, it was very rare. It was almost extinct within the Federation. There was a certain probability that it existed in 13 Specter, but after so many years, there was no news of it. The extreme een crystal was a super material for making ice magic robes, ice talismans, and ice magic treasures. More importantly, this special magic metal could only be produced in an environment where the aura of death and spirit intermingled. It could perfectly conceal the characteristics of the aura of death or spirit. The aura released by cultivators who wore magic robes with the extreme een crystal would be completely concealed. Ghost or demon wearing such magic robes could also conceal the aura of death. Li Daoyu, I've been in 13 Specter for a while. I once passed by the dark valley that old man Tang mentioned. There was a giant frost toad guarding there. It was a king-level ghost beast that was equivalent to a soul formation realm cultivator. I was no match for it at all. Although the extreme crystal is very tempting, it's useless if I can't get it. Therefore, I'd like to invite Li Daoyu to come with me, the goddess Hongyang replied. Li Daochong thought for a moment. He had heard Tang Guangbei mention the extreme crystal before, but he did not pay much attention to it. It was not very useful to him. However, Li Daochong did not expect to be able to subdue the cherry blossom gauze at that time. If he wanted the cherry blossom gauze to follow him into the Federation, he would have to make some preparations. Otherwise, there would be trouble. As long as the king-level ghost beast is not possessed, Li can deal with it. However, wouldn't it be easier for Li to go alone? Why should I bring you guys along? Li Daochong suddenly changed the topic. The goddess Hongyang was stunned for a moment. Her beautiful pupils shrank slightly. She did not expect Li Daochong to say such a thing. After a short pause, the goddess Hongyang pursed her lips and said, Li Daoyu, the Dark Soul Mountain Range is an area completely occupied by the Rakshasa state. Although with Li Daochong's strength, he is not afraid of those dark ghosts. Even if the Grand Wizard appears, he can easily destroy them. However, Li Daochong should not know much about witchcraft arrays. There are countless maze-type witchcraft arrays in the Dark Soul Mountain Range. Of course, for Li Daochong, it is not dangerous, but it will waste a lot of time. Without a year and a half, I believe that he will not be able to reach the exact location. Li Daochong's previous words were not spoken casually. He really wanted to do this. However, after listening to the goddess Hongyang's words, this idea was dispelled. There was no harm in bringing a useful person along to get a share of the loot. Then what's the use of old man Tang? Just because he provided a piece of information, you want to share it with him? Li Daochong continued to ask. Li Daoyu is straightforward, but old man Tang is not useless. In fact, he is very useful. The Tang family is a famous spiritual machinery family in the Federation. They hold more than 1,000 spiritual machinery patents in their hands and countless spiritual machinery artifacts. The extreme crystal has no attribute. Even if we know the location of the valley, we will not be able to find the extreme crystal. Such a large area is hundreds of meters underground. Even if you and I dig 300 meters underground, we may not be able to find it. However, old man Tang has a way to find it. Moreover, there is no harm in being on good terms with the Tang family. The goddess Hongyang replied. Li Daochong touched his chin and said, Since he is useful, let's bring him along. The goddess Hongyang nodded slightly and said, Li Daoyu, how about we set off this afternoon? Okay. Li Daochong thought for a moment and replied, See you at noon. When the goddess Hongyang left, she did not forget to give Li Daochong a flirtatious look. However, after the latter agreed, he sat cross-legged and meditated. He did not even look at her. The goddess Hongyang pursed her lips and turned away. Li Daochong had just entered the yuanying stage and had not yet stabilized his cultivation. Fortunately, his foundation was solid now. There would not be any problems if he consolidated it a little later. While Li Daochong was adjusting his breath, he looked inside himself. In the small world inside his body, Yuanying was floating in the center with a confused look on his face. Yuanying could cultivate by himself. He was the second primordial spirit of the original body. The first primordial spirit was the soul of the original body. Yuanying would continue to grow throughout the Yuanying stage and then merge with the original body's soul. At that time, he would be in the divine transformation stage. At the divine transformation stage, the primordial spirit could exist independently of the physical body and could even control the physical body from thousands of miles away. The physical body of a divine transformation stage cultivator belonged to the elemental spirit body, which was a level higher than the spirit body. The physical body could not be destroyed for hundreds of years without a soul. Li Daochong had just entered the yuanying stage and was only at the early stage. However, his yuanying was emitting a faint golden brilliance. Just like Jin Dan, this was the sun yuanying. In the heart of yuanying, Li Daochong, a blue-golden sun was slowly rotating inside. It was the spirit sun thunder core formed by the yang thunder. At this time, it had completely merged with Li Daochong's yuanying and became the most important part of his primordial spirit. It was almost impossible for any ghost in the Hades to devour or possess Li Daochong. Even those terrifyingly powerful evil demons of the Hades could hardly pose a threat to Li Daochong. The hot-blooded upgrader and the sun thunder nascent soul were enough to kill most ghosts. Li Daochong's psychokinesis battle technique circulated 3 times and the spirit qi in his body quickly stabilized. The previously undigested parts were all consolidated. He reached the early stage of the yuanying stage in one go. After this upgrade, his strength increased qualitatively. When Li Daochong opened his eyes, the depths of his pitch-black pupils were like stars, vast and distant. Li Daochong lowered his head and looked at his hands. His skin was as smooth as jade and seemed very soft. However, that was just an illusion. This pair of jade-like hands could easily crush magic treasures below the heaven stage into powder. Li Daochong's spirit body was advancing towards the elemental spirit body. Currently, only his hands were jade-like, the rest of his body was still in the spirit body state. Li Daochong's lips curled up slightly and he suddenly said, "You've been watching for so long. Have you seen enough?" There was no one in the room and the door was tightly shut. However, just as Li Daochong's voice fell, there was a slight movement in the room next door. A beautiful eye flashed through a small hole in the wall. The small hole in the wall quickly expanded and Cherry Blossom Gauze walked out. Cherry Blossom Gauze didn't participate in last night's celebration party. Qin Zhan also invited her. Qin Zhan and the others were very curious about this expert who suddenly appeared by Li Daochong's side. Chu Tianqi and Kong Lanxin even used their positions to enter the Federation's secret archives to investigate, hoping to find information about this mysterious person. However, they searched through all the available archives and couldn't find any information about this young officer by Li Daochong's side. This guy seemed to have jumped out of a crack in a rock. And the moment he jumped out, he was terrifyingly strong. Li Daochong killing the Grand Wizard in an instant was one thing. After all, he already had a considerable amount of strength, so at least there was an omen. This newcomer, on the other hand, was able to kill the Grand Wizard in an instant as soon as he appeared. Moreover, he looked even more relaxed than Li Daochong. The Grand Wizard was no different from a cat or a dog in front of him. However, as soon as Qin Zhan sent out the invitation, Li Daochong rejected it. What a joke, this was Cherry Blossom Gauze. How could he let her appear in public? Of course not. Cherry Blossom Gauze was arranged to stay in the room next to Li Daochong's, so no one dared to disturb her. Last night, when Goddess Hong Yang appeared in Li Daochong's room, Cherry Blossom Gauze felt strange and made a small hole in the wall. Cherry Blossom Gauze thought that she had done a good job of hiding her aura and only used her eyes to look. She thought that Li Daochong wouldn't find out, but she was obviously wrong. Li Daochong had placed a soul restriction on Cherry Blossom Gauze, which was the deepest level of restriction. As long as Li Daochong wanted to, he could instantly see through her every move. He could even roughly know what she was thinking. The reason why Li Daochong didn't stop Cherry Blossom Gauze from peeping was because he didn't sense any malicious intent from her soul. He was just curious. Secondly, Li Daochong didn't know that Goddess Hong Yang had come to his room last night. He was also curious about Cherry Blossom Gauze's peeping. He wanted to know what the high and mighty Wu Ho wanted to do after being restrained by him. Of course, when he woke up in the morning, Li Daochong roughly knew why Cherry Blossom Gauze was peeping. Wu Ho was also a woman. As long as she was a woman, she had a gossipy heart. It was obvious that Cherry Blossom Gauze was looking at some kind of erotic scene. Unfortunately, nothing happened. It was just a man and a woman lying on a large bed and sleeping for a night. There was nothing interesting to see. However, Cherry Blossom Gauze was very persistent. She kept looking, but didn't move away from her peeping. Li Daochong would feel embarrassed if he didn't say anything. Naturally, a wall made of silver couldn't stop Cherry Blossom Gauze from breaking through it and entering Li Daochong's room. However, Cherry Blossom Gauze's heart was in turmoil. She didn't expect Li Daochong to know that she was peeping. Awkwardness spread across the face of the former Wu Ho. "Mr. Li, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to peep. It's just that I heard some noise last night. Someone broke into your room." Before Cherry Blossom Gauze could finish, Li Daochong interrupted her. "Get ready. Come with me to the Dark Soul Mountain Range at noon." "Ah, okay." Cherry Blossom Gauze wasn't prepared at all and responded reflexively. With the soul seal, facing Li Daochong was like facing a giant beast. He could kill her with a casual breath. Her life was in his hands. Even Wu Ho would tremble in fear. "Okay, go ahead." Li Daochong nodded slightly. Cherry Blossom Gauze didn't expect Li Daochong to not pursue the matter at all. This guy was really unpredictable. Cherry Blossom Gauze returned to her room through the hole in the wall with a suspicious look. At noon, an underground passage opened more than 10 kilometers away from the northwest stronghold building. Tang Guangbei walked out first, followed by Goddess Hong Yang. Then Li Daochong and Cherry Blossom Gauze, who was disguised as a young military officer, followed by Yu Yen. Chapter 503. The group of 5 exited the underground passage. Tang Guangbei threw a bean-sized ball out. Bang! A muffled sound. Dust filled the air. This scene reminded Li Daochong of the time when he was a child when he fried brown rice. A flying shuttle appeared in front of the 5 of them. This flying shuttle had a streamlined appearance and looked very sporty. Its surface was as smooth as jade and its body was completely black. It looked more like a yacht than a flying shuttle. It was about 10 meters long and 3 meters wide. The front part was similar to the deck of a ship and the protruding part at the back could accommodate people. This was the first time Li Daochong had seen a flying shuttle like this. The flying shuttles on the cultivation planets were similar to those on Earth, except that they didn't have wheels. Cherry Blossom Gauze stood beside Li Daochong with a strange look on her face. She had always been curious about the cultivation technology of the human race. If it weren't for these advanced cultivation technologies, the human race would have been wiped out by the Hades. The Hades invaded the spirit realm and wiped out everything along the way. They were unstoppable and all the races in the spirit realm were terrified. Until they met the human race, the Hades stopped abruptly and couldn't move forward anymore. What stopped the Hades wasn't that the human race was more talented than the other races, but that the human race had unfathomable cultivation technology. Li Daochong looked at the flying shuttle that Tang Guangbei took out. The goddess Hong Yang was right. The Tang family did have some skills. The 5 of them got on the flying shuttle. The space inside was much larger than they had imagined. It could fit 20 or 30 people without a problem. The interior was extremely luxurious. There were no rows of seats inside the flying shuttle. Instead, it was a luxurious private room with the characteristics of the Federation. There were drinks, pastries, reclining chairs, sofas, and everything else. Tang Guangbei took out a few mid-level spirit stones and put them in the energy slot. He activated the spiritual brain and the flying spiritual array. The spirit energy in the spirit stones quickly gathered in the array. The people sitting in the shuttle could not hear anything, but outside, the shuttle had already disappeared, turning into a speck of light on the horizon and then completely disappearing. This was the latest Aurora flying shuttle developed by the Tang family group. Its speed was much faster than ordinary flying shuttles. Even Foundation establishment cultivators couldn't fly as fast as this flying shuttle. The fastest it could reach was 30 times the speed of sound. In this era of the explosion of cultivation technology brought great convenience and enjoyment to people. Most of the time, even cultivators would rather use technological products than rely on their own flying swords. That was very tiring. Of course, no matter how advanced their techniques were, they would never be able to reach the state where cultivators of Gene Dan and above could fly freely in the air. However, this Aurora flying shuttle had already surpassed the flying speed of ordinary Gene Dan cultivators. Most importantly, there was no consumption of energy when taking the shuttle. 13 Specter's environment was harsh, but with the shuttle, even ordinary people could travel freely in this dark world. Li Daochong looked down at the ground that was quickly passing by. It was quite pleasant to ride a flying shuttle. 13 Specter was huge. It was equivalent to 10 Blue Bay star times. Its territory was vast and boundless. Half of it was land and the other half was sea. The land was mainly divided into 2 large continents. One was the Nine Nether continent where the demon subduing city was located, and the other was the Devil Soul continent on the other side of the Nether Demon Sea. Li Daochong's destination was the Dark Soul mountain range on the Devil Soul continent. It was more than 18,000 kilometers away from the demon subduing city. However, this Aurora flying shuttle, which was newly developed by the Tang family group, could reach it in less than an hour at its maximum speed. However, the environment on 13 Specter was extremely harsh. If the Aurora flying shuttle couldn't reach its maximum speed, it could reach it in about 2 hours with a large amount of spirit stones. This speed was already astonishing enough. Of course, if Li Daochong flew on his own, he could reach it in a few minutes. However, in that way, other than Cherry Blossom Gauze, the other 3 wouldn't be able to bear it, so he couldn't fly with them. Of course, if he really wanted to think of a way, there would still be a way. Li Daochong also wanted to slack off, so sitting in the flying shuttle was still very comfortable. On such a long journey, it was impossible not to meet any dark ghosts. However, the speed of the Aurora flying shuttle was too fast, and before the dark ghost could react, a beam of light had already flashed past and disappeared. As a result, the journey was relatively peaceful, except when they flew above the Nether Demon Sea, they encountered a group of iron yuan birds and a giant beast in the sea. Tens of thousands of iron yuan birds attacked a rotten whale crocodile that surfaced from the sea. The rotten whale crocodile's body was over 100 meters long, and it was incomparably huge. It was the tyrant of the Nether Demon Sea. It was originally a giant beast born from 13 Specter, but after being infected by the death aura, it turned into a rotten whale crocodile. This kind of natural law battle could be seen everywhere on 13 Specter, so it could be avoided. However, the rotten whale crocodile was not something that could be easily encountered. Tang Guangbei had his eyes on the giant beast's essence, which was one of the materials for crafting level 15 talismans. Goddess Hong Yang killed the rotten whale crocodile and took the giant beast's essence, but in the end, many iron yuan birds were accidentally injured. The flock of birds immediately targeted Goddess Hong Yang and the Aurora flying shuttle, but they found the wrong opponent. Goddess Hong Yang killed the rotten whale crocodile without much effort, but faced with tens of thousands of iron yuan birds, she was a little overwhelmed. It was not that she could not defeat them, but that there were too many of them, and she could not finish them off in a short time. Li Daochong looked at the densely packed iron yuan birds flying around and only felt that it was noisy. He gave Cherry Blossom Gauze a look. Cherry Blossom Gauze, who was dressed as a young officer, flew out of the flying shuttle with the tsang ink that Li Daochong had given her. With a few slashes, tens of thousands of iron yuan birds fell to the Nether Demon Sea. The remaining iron yuan birds were not stupid. They instantly sensed the danger and fled in all directions. This small interlude only delayed them a little, but it added a little fun to this journey. When Cherry Blossom Gauze returned to the flying shuttle, Tang Guangbei and Goddess Hong Yang secretly cast a surprised look at her. Why would such a strong person listen to Li Daocheng's every word? Who exactly was he? Tang Guangbei and Goddess Hong Yang's reverence for Li Daocheng became even stronger. This young man was right in front of them, but he seemed to be far away and unfathomable. The more they interacted with him, the more mysterious they felt. When Tang Guangbei and Goddess Hong Yang's hearts were in turmoil, Cherry Blossom Gauze stood up respectfully and took out the tea leaves from the small box that was enchanted with the ice array. She poured a cup of steaming tea for Li Daocheng and held it in front of Li Daocheng with both hands. "Mr. Li, sorry to disturb you just now. Have a cup of tea to calm yourself down." Cherry Blossom Gauze's eyes flashed with a mischievous look. After she finished speaking, she did not forget to glance at Goddess Hong Yang. Li Daocheng smiled bitterly in his heart. He did not expect Wu Ho to be so attentive for no reason. However, the feeling of holding someone's lifeline was pretty good. Li Daocheng slowly took the tea and took a sip. When he looked up at Cherry Blossom Gauze, his eyes flashed with warning. He activated his telekinesis and said telepathically, "Don't do such meaningless things in the future. Your identity is not suitable for attracting too much attention. Without my instructions, just stay quiet." "Okay, Mr. Li," Cherry Blossom Gauze replied immediately. A slight smile flashed across her face, and she returned to her seat. Yu Yen was the only person who knew about Cherry Blossom Gauze's identity. At this moment, seeing Wu Ho's behavior, she felt that it was strange. The rest of the journey was smooth. Half an hour later, they flew out of the Sea of Ghosts and entered the Devil Soul continent. After another half an hour, a vast and endless mountain range appeared in front of them. This was the destination of their trip, the Dark Soul Mountain Range. After flying for a while, they entered the Dark Soul Mountain Range. Tang Guangbei controlled the flying shuttle to land in a forest at the foot of the mountain. Under the influence of the aura of death, this once lively mountain range was now unrecognizable. Just like the other regions of 13 Specter, the mountain range was covered in dead trees. The ground was scorched black, and strange rocks were everywhere. They looked like ferocious and terrifying ghosts were stationed there. A faint mist floated in the air. All kinds of roars and howls came from the mountain range from time to time. It was hair-raising. If an ordinary person were to appear here, they would be scared to death. Rustling sounds came from the dead bushes from time to time, as if there were ghosts wandering in them. "Mr. Li, if we continue forward, we will enter the witchcraft formation set up by the Ghost Army. The flying shuttle is too big of a target and will easily trigger the witchcraft formation. We will have to walk on our own from now on," Tang Guangbei explained to Li Daocheng as he put away the flying shuttle. "Thank you for leading the way, Mr. Tang." Li Daocheng nodded. The five of them walked into the depths of the mountain range under Tang Guangbei's lead. Tang Guangbei was wearing a pair of gale shoes on his feet. They were enchanted with 3 different types of miniature spiritual arrays, allowing him to walk like the wind. Tang Guangbei's cultivation was the lowest among the 5 of them. If he didn't wear such a pair of shoes, he would have a hard time walking in this place. The 5 of them walked very quickly. They crossed a mountain in a little over 10 minutes. They followed the designated route for more than an hour. They didn't encounter any dark ghosts along the way, not even a ghost shadow. This made Tang Guangbei and Goddess Hong Yang feel very strange. There were as many dark ghosts as there were hairs on a cow in the Dark Soul Mountain Range. They had crossed such a long distance, but they didn't encounter anything. Tang Guangbei's detection magic treasure didn't react at all. "Mr. Tang, isn't there a Rakshasa State's ghost army stationed in the Dark Soul Mountain Range? Why is it so quiet?" Goddess Hong Yang couldn't help but ask. "Fairy, this old man doesn't know either." The detection bell didn't react at all. There are no traces of dark ghosts within a radius of 20 kilometers. Tang Guangbei was also confused. He had thought that this journey would be very difficult. Who would have thought that it would be so smooth? Yu Yen heard their conversation. She pursed her lips and glanced at Cherry Blossom Gauze. With this great deity of the Rakshasa state present, who would dare approach the dark ghosts? Would they be seeking death? Tang Guangbei and goddess Hong Yang naturally didn't know the reason, but the two of them glanced at Li Daochong. Could it be that his spirit chi was so powerful that the dark ghosts were afraid of him? Despite their suspicions, they still had to continue. With Li Daochong and that mysterious officer around, Tang Guangbei was still very confident, and his speed increased a notch. Soon, a secluded valley appeared before the five of them. "Mr. Li, this is the place," Tang Guangbei said weakly. Tang Guangbei said weakly. After such a long journey, even with the help of the storm shoes, the old man still felt tired. Boom! Just as Tang Guangbei finished speaking, a loud explosion came from the depths of the valley. In the distance, a fiery cloud rushed into the sky. Genius 1 second. Remember this address. Mobile version website. Chapter 504. Were there people fighting in the depths of the valley? Li Daochong's eyes flickered with a faint light. He actually did not notice the other party's existence. Even when he saw the flames, he still could not sense any aura. This valley was full of witchcraft arrays. Coupled with the chaotic death aura and spiritual energy, even someone as powerful as Li Daochong's spiritual force field would be seriously disturbed. In this environment, the eyes were more reliable than spiritual force. In the distance, at the same time as the flames soared into the sky, miserable screams could be heard. Then, several rays of light soared into the sky. It was a cultivator. Tang Guangbei's old face revealed a hint of doubt. Someone had actually come here first. The news of the extreme Een crystal appearing in 13 Specter's Dark Soul Mountain range was only known to the Tang family. 2 months ago, a few clansmen of the Tang family who were earning points in 13 Specter mistakenly entered the Dark Soul Mountain range. They accidentally came to this valley and found the extreme Een crystal. Those clansmen originally wanted to take the extreme Een crystal and leave 13 Specter to return to the family. In the end, they did not get the item. Instead, they angered the king ghost beast in the valley, the giant frost toad, and all 4 clansmen of the Tang family died. All 4 of them were Jin Dan cultivators. However, before they died, they used the Tang family's unique sound transmission secret method to send the news back to the family. After Tang Guangbei received the news, he immediately came to 13 Specter. There were a total of 5 people from the family who came with him. Among them was a Yuanying cultivator. Who would have thought that not long after arriving at 13 Specter, the Rakshasa state would launch an all-out attack on the Federation? A large number of ghost soldiers appeared in 13 Specter. Before Tang Guangbei could take action, the war broke out. Tang Guangbei originally did not plan to participate in the war. He only wanted to get the extreme Een crystal. However, Tang Guangbei did not expect that the Rakshasa state would be serious this time. It was not safe to stay in Demon Subduing City. The ghost army broke through the defense and wantonly hunted cultivators in the city. No one could stay out of it, and Tang Guangbei was forced to fight against the ghost army that had invaded the Demon Subduing City. In the end, the 5 cultivators of the Tang clan who came with Tang Guangbei all died in battle, and Tang Guangbei was basically dead. If it wasn't for Li Daochong sending people to rescue the injured cultivators and bring Tang Guangbei back, he would have been cured with a miraculous qi healing technique. Tang Guangbei was already a dead man. As his thoughts drifted, Tang Guangbei's expression became slightly uneasy. The price the Tang family had paid to come to Shadow Demon Star this time was simply too great. If they didn't obtain the extreme Een crystal in the end, they would really lose everything. Who in the world would discover the extreme Een crystal? Tang Guangbei had a question mark in his heart. At this moment, The streaks of light that soared into the sky quickly flew towards the area where Li Daocheng's group of 5 were. There were also 5 people in total, 3 men and 2 women. Although they were not ghost cultivators, the murderous aura on their bodies was overbearing. The 5 of them were all yuanying cultivators. One of them was in the middle stage of yuanying, 2 were in the late stage of yuanying, and 2 were in the peak stage of yuanying. Sensing the aura of the 5 people, Goddess Hong Yang's expression changed slightly. Tang Guangbei's pair of turbid old eyes twitched. He didn't expect to meet 5 yuanying cultivators at the same time in the depths of the Dark Soul Mountain range. Such a combination could indeed do whatever they wanted on 13 Specter. They wouldn't even be afraid of a Grand Wizard Ghost if they met a lone Grand Wizard Ghost. Only the Witch Ghost Legion or several Grand Wizards would pose a threat to them. The 5 of them together were enough to become one of the top existences on 13 Specter's food chain. Although the 5 yuanying cultivators were full of killing intent, they looked a little embarrassed at this moment. The 2 female yuanying cultivators' hair was a little messy, and there was shock in their eyes. The 3 male cultivators weren't much better. An old man's face was full of dust. When they saw Li Daocheng's group of 5, their eyes revealed a fierce glint. The 5 cultivators' aura and condition were very different from ordinary cultivators. It wasn't hard to tell that they were felons who had seriously violated the cultivation law in the Federation and were exiled to 13 Specter to atone for their crimes. Moreover, they should have stayed on 13 Specter for a while and had basically adapted to the environment here. They had survived countless life and death battles. Tang Guangbei's expression suddenly froze. He had an impression of one of the yuanying cultivators. His heart skipped a beat, and he immediately sent a voice transmission to Li Daocheng's group of 4. Everyone, be careful. They are exiled cultivators. That short, stout middle-aged man is called Mountain Razor O Zhiliang. 3 years ago, he massacred a 4th-grade cultivation planet and didn't let a single cultivator or civilian escape. He almost destroyed the planet. Yuanying is a peak cultivator. In the end, 3 members of the Divine Generals were dispatched to capture him and exile him to 13 Specter. Someone from my Tang family held a position in the military. 2 years ago there was news that this guy was dead. I didn't expect him to still be alive after 3 years. Tang Guangbei's warning caused Goddess Hong Yang's hands to tremble. As a former member of the Divine Generals, how could she not know the name O Zhiliang? 3 years ago, Goddess Hong Yang had also participated in the operation to capture him. Tang Guangbei didn't know the complete information. The Divine Generals didn't dispatch 3 but 5. Capturing a peak cultivator of yuanying was much more difficult than killing him. 3 of them were out in the open while 2 were in the dark. At that time, Goddess Hong Yang had already left the Divine Generals. Due to a lack of manpower, she was temporarily summoned back to take on this mission. Zhu Shanjinren O Zhiliang's name was known by everyone in the Third Ring Starfield. The Federation once regretted that they didn't discover this prodigy earlier. O Zhiliang had reached the peak of yuanying at the age of 45. His cultivation speed wasn't fast, but after reaching the peak of yuanying, his combat power was extremely terrifying. At that time, he was able to fight against 3 Divine Generals without being at a disadvantage. If it weren't for the help of Goddess Hong Yang and another peak cultivator of yuanying, the 3 Divine Generals wouldn't have been able to capture O Zhiliang. One of them might have even been killed. O Zhiliang's strength was comparable to a soul formation grand cultivator. He had an extremely violent personality and was a demon who killed without batting an eyelid. It was a pity that he was eventually exiled. The 13 Specter had benefited the human race in another way. At that moment, Yu Yan's body was trembling slightly for no reason. The 5 exiled yuanying cultivators were filled with murderous intent. How could Yu Yan, who was only at the early Jin Dan stage, possibly withstand it? Li Daochong and Cherry Blossom Gauze didn't look at the 5 Yuanying cultivators. Instead, they casually looked at the place where the explosion had just occurred in the depths of the valley. The aura surging out from there was truly powerful. Tang Guangbei only recognized Zhiliang. He had never seen the other 4 cultivators before. However, their battle records weren't any worse than Zhiliang's, even if they weren't as strong as him. The 2 female cultivators were naturally good-looking. It was difficult for them to not be good-looking after reaching the Yuanying stage. The younger-looking female cultivator was called Lan Ningzi. She reached the Yuanying stage in her 30s. She was definitely a genius. However, she was able to cultivate to the nascent soul stage by constantly using her beauty to seduce male cultivators. Once they became dual cultivation partners, she would kill the other party, absorb and refine the other party's spirit meridians, and refine the spirit body into medicinal pills. People called her the man-devouring fairy. She was at the late Yuanying stage. The older female cultivator was called Lu Jinfeng. She specialized in finding young people who had just awakened their spirit meridians. After killing them, she would steal their spirit meridians for her own cultivation. She was at the late Yuanying stage. As for the other 2 male cultivators, one of them was an old man called Yin Yi. He was at the peak of the Yuanying stage. He specialized in hunting cultivators above the peak of the Jin Dan stage and stealing their treasures. It was said that at least 80 cultivators had died in his hands. The other one was called Pan Lingji. He looked feminine and had long hair that draped over his shoulders. He was neither a man nor a woman. If not for his Adam's apple and flat chest, it would be difficult to determine his gender with the naked eye. His deeds were even more bizarre. He disguised himself as a woman, seduced male cultivators, and then killed them to steal their treasures. If these 5 people were not in a dangerous place like 13 Specter, it would be impossible for them to form a team. They each had their own ulterior motives and would have plotted against each other. However, they knew very well that on 13 Specter, it was impossible for them to survive alone. Only by working together would their chances of survival increase. After the 5 exiled cultivators discovered Li Daochong's group of 5, they flew over and landed in front of Li Daochong's group. As soon as they landed, 5 psychic powers wandered around Li Daochong's group of 5. After probing, the 5 exiled cultivators revealed unconcealable smiles on their faces. However, their smiles looked very strange. 4 ants and a peak Yuanying. Pan Lingji stared straight at Li Daochong as he licked his lips hungrily. He had not touched a male cultivator for more than a year now. The male cultivators on Shadowed Devil Star were all ugly, making him want to vomit just by looking at them. A cultivator as handsome as this young man in front of him was a rarity. Lan Ningzi also looked at Li Daochong and could not help but twist her hip. She could not wait to pounce on Li Daochong. Yin Yi, on the other hand, was very interested in Yu Yan. Although he was not young, he was still a Yuanying cultivator. He had spent the longest time on 13 Specter and had not tasted a pure female cultivator for a long time. Yin Yi did not dare to touch female cultivators like Lan Ningzi and Lu Jinfeng, who knew what tricks they had up their sleeves. Lu Jinfeng looked at the jade pendant hanging on Tang Guangbei's waist. She could tell at a glance that it was not an ordinary item. Zhu Shanzhenren, Zhiliang, was the only one who looked at the cherry blossom gauze. He had not seen such a stunning beauty for many years. Fairy Hongyang was the only one who went unnoticed. It wasn't that she was inconspicuous, but rather that the aura of a peak nascent soul cultivator emanating from her body struck fear into the hearts of the 5 cultivators. Due to certain considerations, they all unanimously chose not to make eye contact with this person who posed the greatest threat. In the eyes of the 5 exiled cultivators, Fairy Hongyang was the strongest of the 5 who had appeared out of nowhere. If it were not for the existence of this peak Yuanying female cultivator, they would have already attacked. You guys are also here for that bastard's king-level beast core? Zhiliang broke the silence. Genius memorized this site's address in 1 second. Mobile version of reading website. Chapter 505. Fellow Taoist, oh, why waste your breath on them? Let's just kill them and swallow their spirit veins. Then, we can loot their belongings. Look at their clothes. Other than that brat, everyone else looks rich. It just so happens that we haven't had time to replenish our energy. Now that they've come knocking on our door, we have no choice but to take them. Inye's eyes revealed a fierce glint as he transmitted his voice to Zhiliang. Elder In, it's not easy to get a few bait and cannon fodder. It would be a pity to just kill them. Moreover, it won't be easy to get rid of them. That female Yuanying peak stage cultivator has a strong aura. Don't you think she looks familiar? Although that old man's cultivation isn't high, his equipment isn't to be underestimated. What we can see is enough to contend against an early Yuanying peak stage cultivator. What's hidden in his storage ring must be even more powerful. Our goal is the giant frost toad's king-level beast core. Elder In, don't throw away the watermelon for the sesame. Inyi didn't say anything and tacitly agreed with Zhiliang's words. It wasn't that he didn't see through the situation of the 5 people, but his savage nature didn't allow him to think too much. Tang Guangbei smiled and said, "That's right. Seniors, were you fighting with the giant frost toad?" Zhiliang lowered his eyes and nodded. "There's nothing in this valley other than that beast. Don't you think so?" Zhiliang's tone was arrogant as he looked at Tang Guangbei with a playful expression. "Seniors, your abilities are unparalleled. Have you already killed the giant frost toad?" Tang Guangbei pretended not to know and asked. "Killed? Old man, do you think the giant frost toad is a frog in the field? You think you can kill it just because you want to? Go and kill it for me to see." Pan Lingji interjected with a strange tone. Tang Guangbei was speechless for a moment. The already awkward situation between the two groups of unfamiliar cultivators became even more rigid. However, Li Daochong and Cherry Blossom Gauze were indifferent to the current situation. It was as if they didn't see Zhiliang's group of 5. The two looked at each other, and were about to head deeper into the valley when suddenly, there was a flash of light. A flying shuttle shot over and landed not far away from them with a whoosh. Li Daochong's group of 5 looked surprised, and there were others as well. This flying shuttle that had suddenly arrived was actually much more high-end than Tang Guangbei's. The eye-catching logo of a dragon head on the front was extremely eye-catching. The Supreme Dragon-class flying shuttle. There was no way the Shenghua Federation could produce a flying shuttle of this level. This was the representative product of the Zun Long Cultivation Company of the Kuan Empire, one of the 3 major cultivation empires. Pure imported product. If Tang Guangbei's flying shuttle was the best in the Federation, then the Supreme Dragon-class flying shuttle was one of the best in the human race. Both its appearance and performance were far superior to the shuttles produced by the Federation. The Tang family's expertise in spiritual machinery was already impressive enough, but it was still far from being comparable to the 3 cultivation empires. The revered dragon flying shuttle looked very much like a dragon's head, except that it didn't have horns or whiskers, nor did it have eyes, nose, or mouth. Its shape was very similar, but it followed the streamlined lines. But at this time, this luxurious flying shuttle was covered in scars and had lost its original luster. The door opened and first, a slender and beautiful leg stretched out of the car. A tall woman wearing a corset Taoist robe stepped out of the car. Then, more than 10 cultivators wearing Taoist robes followed. Their cultivation levels weren't high, but their equipment was definitely top-notch in the Shenghua Federation. These cultivators were all late-stage Jin Dan cultivators, and 2 of them were Yuanying cultivators. But this group of people looked a little embarrassed, as if they had just suffered a loss. The woman's aura wasn't very strong. She was only in the qi condensation realm, the weakest among them. But the cultivators who came out of the car followed behind her respectfully. Their expressions were serious, and they strictly kept the woman in a safe zone. The woman looked to be about 20 years old, about the same age as Li Daochong. She was pretty and charming, and was a beauty in the making. When the woman got out of the flying shuttle, she frowned and looked at O Zhiliang with displeasure. She said in an unfriendly tone, "Mr. O, why did you leave without saying goodbye?" When O Zhiliang and the others saw the flying shuttle land, each of their faces showed regret. The original plan was to let this unruly young lady and her followers go to the Western Paradise, but they didn't expect that they would still be able to escape. This young lady's origin was unusual. Even if her cultivation level wasn't high, O Zhiliang and the other criminals didn't dare to touch her. Song Lanxin, the first successor of the Shenghua Federation's #1 cultivation company, Yunyao Daoist robe. Her grandfather was called Song Federation, and her father was called Song Tsangyun. These two names in the Federation were enough to scare people to death. Yunyao Daoist robe was founded by the Song Federation. Yuanying was a peak cultivator, but he wasn't that powerful. The Song Federation was a one-star blacksmith, and he was famous in the 3 great cultivation empires. Countless cultivators sought him out to refine magic treasures and robes. Among them, there were even soul formation cultivators. Song Tsangyun didn't inherit his father's will and chose to enter politics. Last year, he was elected to the Federation's parliament. If you didn't know these two, it could only mean that you were a country bumpkin from a remote planet who didn't know anything and wasn't very smart. No matter how fierce O Zhiliang and the others were, they didn't dare to touch Song Lanxin personally. If they did, their crimes would be much more serious than before. Although their crimes were serious, the Federation wouldn't kill them because they still had value. They could just throw them on 13 Specter and let them fend for themselves while killing Dark Ghost. The Federation definitely wouldn't kill them. But if they touched Song Lanxin, they would be greeted with death. The Song Federation only needed to wave their hands and soul formation cultivators would come to 13 Specter to hunt them down. Their living environment was already very bad. If another soul formation cultivator came to hunt them down, they would definitely die. Moreover, Song Lanxin's bodyguards weren't easy to deal with. The robe she was wearing was a heavenly mystic true treasure level robe that the Song Federation spent half a year to refine. The Federation didn't have more than 5 of them. Yuanying was a peak cultivator, and he couldn't break the robe's protective array even if he bombarded it for a day. Therefore, it was unrealistic to want to kill Song Lanxin. In fact, O Zhiliang and the others didn't even know that there was a giant frost toad in the depths of the Dark Soul mountain range. They were hired by Song Lanxin to hunt the giant frost toad. If it wasn't for Song Lanxin, they wouldn't have known there was such a place in the Dark Soul mountain range. Ordinary people couldn't afford to hire O Zhiliang and the others. Without a background like Song Lanxin's, they would have been killed before they could even speak. More importantly, they didn't want spirit stones or other resources. These things could be obtained from 13 Specter. Song Lanxin promised them that as long as they killed the giant frost toad and took the beast core, they would be transferred out of 13 Specter. She would also give them a new identity and start their lives anew. It was the same as being released from prison early. O Zhiliang and the others were naturally tempted. Song Lanxin did have this ability. The 5 of them agreed to take the risk with Song Lanxin. The giant frost toad's strength was equivalent to the early stage of the soul formation realm. It was very dangerous to capture it, and there was even a possibility of death. But for freedom, O Zhiliang and the others were willing to risk it. However, on the way to the Dark Soul mountain range, Song Lanxin's arrogant attitude towards them and even treated them like servants completely angered the 5 of them. They began to secretly plan a way to kill Song Lanxin. After arriving at the secluded valley, O Zhiliang and the others discussed how to set a secret trap when they captured the giant frost toad. They wanted to borrow the toad's power to kill Song Lanxin. Zhiliang and the others didn't just want to vent their anger by killing Song Lanxin's group. They also wanted the resources and treasures on Song Lanxin's group. But now that Song Lanxin was fine, their plan was obviously ruined. Daoist, oh, this Song girl isn't dead. This is bad. Pan Lingji revealed a worried expression and transmitted his voice. Daoist, oh, our plan won't be discovered by the Song family, right? If they find out that we set a trap, our lives will be in danger. Yi transmitted his voice. Zhiliang and the others had been working together for a while. The 5 of them had a mental field. When one of them transmitted his voice, the other 4 could sense it. Everyone, don't worry. Although the plan didn't succeed, Song Lanxin definitely won't see through it. Since she's not dead, we'll act according to the situation and continue to be her bodyguard. Zhiliang transmitted his voice calmly. The other 4 tacitly agreed with Zhiliang's suggestion and lowered their heads to welcome Song Lanxin's arrival. Song Lanxin looked at Zhiliang angrily. If it wasn't for the level 16 protective talisman that her grandfather gave her, everyone would have died. Zhiliang pretended to be innocent and said with a bitter face, "Miss Song, we had no choice in that situation. The giant frost toad released the ice flame wave. We couldn't block it at all. Were we going to die? We could only run." Song Lanxin snorted coldly. "Humph, I hired you guys to block the spear. The 5 of you are so strong. Can't you block it together?" When she said this, Zhiliang and the others' faces turned ugly. "Block the spear? Little girl, even if you really think that way, you can't say it out loud. Isn't this clearly a slap to the faces of the 5 of them in front of everyone?" An old man behind Song Lanxin bowed and whispered something. Song Lanxin nodded reluctantly and said to Zhiliang, "I'll let it go this time. If there's a next time where you run away, our agreement will be cancelled." "Okay, Miss Song. You have the final say," Zhiliang replied. Song Lanxin glared at Zhiliang and then turned to Li Daochong and the others. Finally, her eyes fell on Goddess Hongyang and said arrogantly, "Hongyang, why did you bring these guys here?" Li Daochong was surprised. This woman actually knew Goddess Hongyang. Goddess Hongyang immediately replied respectfully, "Big Miss, these are my friends. We also came for the giant frost toad." Song Lanxin glanced at Li Daochong and the others and said, "If that's the case, then come with me. After this, I'll pay you a large sum of spirit stones. It's enough for you to cultivate for a few years." Song Lanxin then turned and walked towards the flying shuttle. She didn't ask if they were willing or not. It was as if as long as she said it, this matter would be settled. Goddess Hongyang was in a difficult position. Song Lanxin walked for a while, and saw that Goddess Hongyang didn't follow. She turned and asked curiously, "Why are you still standing there? Come with me. The 4 servants can fly by themselves." "Servants?" Goddess Hongyang sucked in a breath of cold air and looked at Li Daochong. "Idiot." Sure enough, the moment Goddess Hongyang looked over, Li Daochong spat out 2 words. Genius remembered this address in 1 second. Mobile reading website. Chapter 506. Who are you calling an idiot? Song Lanxin glared at Li Daochong and questioned. Li Daochong's voice wasn't loud, but it was loud enough for everyone to hear. Goddess Hongyang knew something was wrong and wanted to stop it, but it was too late. She had a rough understanding of Li Daochong's character in the past few days. Because of Song Lanxin's family background, she had always been a spoiled brat. Everyone who interacted with her was afraid of her because of the powerful background behind her. They didn't argue with her and even indulged her. And Li Daochong most likely would not spoil this young miss. On one side was Song Lanxin, who had great power in the Shenghua Federation, and on the other side was the powerful and mysterious Li Daochong. The collision between the two was like Mars colliding with Earth. No one would give way to the other. Fairy Hongyang's heart was filled with worry, but she could no longer interrupt, nor did she dare to interrupt. I'm talking about the idiot. Li Daochong didn't even look at Song Lanxin and replied calmly. Brat, it's your fortune to be hired by me. Since you don't want the spiritual stones, then forget it. Hongyang, bring the others. Don't follow this brat. Song Lanxin looked at Li Daochong with disgust. Goddess Hongyang's expression was bitter. She wanted to explain but didn't know where to start. After Song Lanxin finished speaking, she turned around and boarded the flying shuttle. Goddess Hongyang followed helplessly. Then, she sent a message to Li Daochong. Mr. Li, I'm really sorry. I owe Miss Song a favor. Please don't hold it against her. I'll go with Miss Song for now. If you're willing, you can come with me. If not, we'll meet up after we kill the giant frosty toad. It's okay. Go ahead. Li Daochong replied simply. After Song Lanxin got on the flying shuttle, she saw that only the goddess Hongyang had followed her. Other than the young man, the other three were standing still. They didn't seem to want to follow her. Song Lanxin said with disdain, Hongyang, why are you with this bunch of trash? Aren't you afraid of ruining the reputation of your predecessor? Goddess Hongyang smiled bitterly. Miss, they are just my friends, not my subordinates. I have no right to force them to follow me. Song Lanxin said coldly, let them be. Let's go. Song Lanxin's bodyguards also got on the shuttle, and the door closed. After a while, the flying shuttle still hadn't taken off. The bodyguard controlling the flying shuttle was so anxious that he was sweating profusely. He pressed the button to activate the flying spiritual array again and again. But no matter how hard he pressed, the spirit array wouldn't activate, and the spirit brain didn't respond at all. What happened? Song Lanxin frowned and asked. Young miss, the spirit brain and spirit array are malfunctioning. The shuttle is unable to take off, the bodyguard said with a bitter face. What? Unable to take off, Song Lanxin's voice raised an octave. The old man sitting beside Song Lanxin used his telekinesis to check the flying shuttle and said, Young miss, the flying spiritual array is damaged and can't be used anymore. The spirit brain is in a dormant state. Old Qin, is this the only flying shuttle? Song Lanxin asked. Young miss, this is the only revered dragon-class flying shuttle. There are other flying shuttles, but I'm afraid it's difficult to even take off in the environment of the valley, Old Qin replied. Unlucky, then we can only get off and fly over by ourselves. Song Lanxin looked like she had swallowed a fly. She had no choice but to open the door and get off again. The group of people got off the flying shuttle again, and they all looked embarrassed. Song Lanxin angrily pressed a button on the flying shuttle. With a bang, the flying shuttle was put away. It had only been a few minutes since they got on and off, and there were so many people getting on and off, it was very funny. Zhiliang and the others looked at each other. What was the meaning of this? At this moment, the temperature in the valley suddenly dropped, and a layer of frost condensed on the ground. Light blue rays of light appeared in the air, forming a huge net that covered the sky. The air seemed to be condensed, and the death aura in the valley became more and more violent. The spirit energy was flickering. A gust of cold air pressed down. Zhiliang squinted his eyes and looked at the giant blue net in the air. He said, Everyone be careful, the net in the air is the ice flame released by the giant frost toad. If you touch Yuanying or below, you will be instantly burned into ice dregs, and nothing will be left. Hiss. The sound of cold air being sucked in came from all around. Most of the bodyguards around Song Lanxin were Jin Dan, and they looked timid when they saw the light blue net less than 10 meters above their heads. Song Lanxin's face was even worse. The sudden appearance of the ice flame net blocked the air route, and they couldn't fly. Did they have to walk? Old Qin, what do we do now? Song Lanxin had no idea and asked Old Qin beside her. Young miss, there is no other way. We can only walk to the nest of the giant frost toad, Old Qin replied. Walk? The environment in the valley is complicated, and the terrain is rugged. There is not even a road, and it is at least a few dozen kilometers to the other end. Old Sheen, that beast was just attacked by us. Will it follow our aura and chase after us? Then we don't have to look for it, and it will come to us on its own. Song Lanshin was shocked. She was afraid when she thought of walking such a long and rugged road. Young miss, the giant frost toad is in its breeding period, and it will not leave its nest. Old Sheen replied regretfully. Then we can only walk. Song Lanshin bit her lower lip and took out a pair of magic boots to wear. Although Song Lanshin was unwilling, she didn't have a better idea. The ice flame net set by the giant frost toad covered the entire valley. The only result of rushing in was death. Song Lanshin and the group walked towards the depths of the valley. Because the valley was full of all kinds of death-type plants, if they accidentally touched them, they would die a horrible death. So they couldn't walk too fast. Oh Zhiliang and the other felons walked at the front, opening the path for the group. Li Daochong and the other three waited for a while, and also walked towards the depths of the valley. Tang Guangbei estimated that the extreme Yin crystal was near the giant frost toad's nest. Song Lanshin was after the king-level beast core, while Li Daochong and the others were after the extreme Yin crystal. However, Li Daochong also didn't want to miss a prey like the giant frost toad. He didn't care about the beast core, but the giant frost toad's skin and marrow were all valuable, and could be used as materials to make ice talismans. Crushing a giant frost toad as a talisman material was enough for Li Daochong to make tens of thousands of level 15 ice talismans. Its value was obvious. After walking for about 10 kilometers, Song Lanshin and the group stopped to rest. The journey wasn't easy. The death-type plants attacked the group again and again. It was rare to encounter such delicious food, so how could they miss it? Normal death-type plants could be easily dealt with, but if they encountered a powerful death-type plant like the Black Death Vine, it would take some effort. When the Black Death Vine grew to a certain extent, even Yuanying cultivators would shrink back. The countless vines could make you doubt your life. Other than the Black Death Vine, there were many ghost beasts and ghost insects hidden under the valley. It took the group more than an hour to travel more than 10 kilometers. To cultivators, this speed was like the speed of a turtle. The ice flame net in the sky would occasionally drop ice flames, and the area that was hit would immediately turn into ice shards. Song Lanshin's bodyguards were mostly Jin Dan cultivators, and under the invasion of the extreme Yin Qi and mixed auras, their energy was depleted very quickly. All of them were panting. Song Lanshin personally distributed pills to each of them, and she sat alone with Old Man Qin to eat the spirit food that she brought with her. As they were eating, Li Daochong and the other three slowly walked out of the withered forest. Li Daochong and the other three walked very slowly. Tang Guangbei needed to scan a large area, and didn't miss any area. Other than the large movement of the extreme Yin crystals in the nest, Tang Guangbei's detection compass showed that there were other areas in the valley with extreme Yin crystals. Song Lanshin frowned when she saw Li Daochong. Why are you following us? Li Daochong couldn't be bothered with Song Lanshin, and sat cross-legged against a tree, and slowly closed his eyes. Song Lanshin was a little annoyed that she was ignored, and directly ran in front of Li Daochong, and questioned, "Brat, didn't you hear me talking to you? I asked you a question, why are you following us?" Cherry Blossom Gauze's beautiful eyes flickered, and just as she was about to step forward to stop Song Lanshin, she heard Li Daochong's telekinesis transmission telling her not to move. Song Lanshin stared at Li Daochong, and the latter's closed eyes opened slightly, and said lightly, "Follow you? You think too much, please stay away from me, you smell very bad." Hearing this, Song Lanshin was so angry that she stomped her feet, pointed at Li Daochong's nose, and said, "Brat, you smell bad. Don't think I don't know what you're planning. You don't have the ability to walk into this valley, and you're still following us for protection." Li Daochong shook his head slightly, and only said, "Little girl, you can go away, I don't want to talk to you. Little girl? Song Lanshin was about to explode, and she turned her head and said, Who can throw this guy away? As soon as she finished speaking, the head of Song Lanshin's bodyguards, Yu Feng, flashed over and reached out to grab Li Daochong. Seeing that a conflict was about to erupt, Goddess Hong Yang's beautiful figure moved, and gently pushed Yu Feng away. Elder Qin also walked over, and his old eyes flashed with helplessness. He said softly to Song Lanshin, Miss, this is 13 Specter, our enemy is the dark ghost, not the human cultivators. The chairman has instructed that unless it's absolutely necessary to fight with other cultivators on 13 Specter, no matter how strong or weak one's cultivation is, the power to resist the dark ghost. If the chairman knows that you don't know your limits, he will be angry. The reason the chairman sent you to get the giant frost toad's beast core is to train your temperament. Without waiting for Elder Qin to finish, Song Lanshin impatiently interrupted, I know. Then, Song Lanshin glared fiercely at Li Daochong, turned around and replied, It's best if you can leave 13 Specter alive. Genius memorized this site's address in 1 second. Mobile version of reading website. Chapter 507. Li Daochong couldn't be bothered to argue with a little girl like her. He closed his eyes and spread out his telekinesis to scan the surroundings as far as possible. Li Daochong's telekinesis was comparable to an early-stage soul formation stage cultivator, but in this valley, his telekinesis range was only 5 kilometers. The giant frost toad's death chi was indeed powerful. As expected of a king-level ghost beast, Li Daochong had encountered so many opponents, and this beast could be ranked in the top 3. It was only slightly weaker than the Hades Devilish Tribe and the Cherry Blossom Gauze. However, the entire valley was the giant frost toad's lair. This place was polluted by the death chi all year round, and this beast grew up here. In the secluded valley, the giant frost toad had all the advantages. Its actual strength was even stronger than the demon dwellers and Luo Yingsha, who had yet to recover to her peak state. Although Song Lanshin left after Old Man Qin's persuasion, she was still very annoyed. From time to time, she would do some very childish things. For example, she would distribute sweet and delicious spirit food to the other cultivators. She even gave out spirit wine. The group of people ate and drank in front of Li Daochong and the others. Song Lanshin even wanted to use the high-grade spirit food to tempt the other cultivators around Li Daochong. Yu Yen, the Cherry Blossom Gauze, and Tang Guangbei were all asked if they wanted some. Unfortunately, Song Lanshin's seduction didn't work. Tang Guangbei was already so old. He was only thinking about the extreme Yin crystal. He didn't have any appetite. Yu Yen was a soldier. How could she be tempted by a little bit of food? As for the Cherry Blossom Gauze, she couldn't eat human food at all. Just looking at it made her feel disgusted. She even wondered how these humans could eat such disgusting food. Old Man Qin was very helpless about Song Lanshin's childish behavior. As the chairman's personal bodyguard, his main task was to protect Song Lanshin and prevent her from doing anything rash. Old Man Qin pretended not to see Song Lanshin's actions. The little girl even deliberately sat very close to Li Daochong and ate with relish, toasting with the accompanying cultivators. That was a joyful eating moment. However, Li Daochong didn't care about Song Lanshin's actions at all. He was using his telekinesis to fight against the death chi in the valley. He tried to expand his telekinesis field. To Li Daochong, this was a form of cultivation. To cultivate. Half an hour later, Song Lanshin and the others finished their rest and continued their journey to the deeper part of the valley. Old Man Qin and Yu Feng protected Song Lanshin from the front and back. Old Man Qin had the highest cultivation level among Song Lanshin's entourage, being at the peak of the nascent soul stage. The other cultivator with the surname Chen was also at the peak of the nascent soul stage. These two cultivators were Song Lanxin's grandpa and were sent by the Song Federation to protect her. This girl wasn't very talented in cultivation, but she had a monstrous talent in telekinesis. If trained well, she would be an outstanding manager in the future. In the eyes of the Song Federation, Song Lanxin's only flaw was her personality. She was spoiled when she was young, and it was very difficult to correct it now. This time, the purpose of letting Song Lanxin lead a team to 13 Specter was to make her suffer. However, the Song Federation didn't expect that this girl would lead a group of people to go sightseeing instead of coming directly to 13 Specter. Song Lanxin spent 3 months on a trip that could have been completed in a few days using a teleportation formation. She had various reasons to stop along the way. Old Man Qin couldn't do anything about it. The Song Federation had a lot of work to do, and they couldn't do anything about it. Just like that, Song Lanxin only arrived at 13 Specter a month ago. Not long after she arrived, the Rakshasa state launched a full-scale attack, and 13 Specter became extremely unsafe. The Song Federation was anxious and put pressure on the Federation to let their granddaughters stay in the safest area. A month had passed, and Song Lanxin was still quite obedient. It was just that she was used to being free, and after a month of isolation, she finally couldn't hold it in anymore. Song Lanxin tried to sneak out a few times, but she was discovered by Old Man Qin and brought back. 2 days later, good news of the victory of the demon subduing city came from the front. Old Man Qin asked around and found out that the Rakshasa state had suffered heavy losses, and more than half of the 13 Specter army had died. Only then did Old Man Qin ask the Song Federation for permission. After getting permission, Old Man Qin allowed Song Lanxin to come out and hunt the giant frost toad. The Song Federation had long known about the existence of this king-level beast, but they had never had the time to deal with it. Before Song Lanxin set off, she specifically said to Li Daochong, "Whoever follows me is a lazy dog." As for Li Daochong, he didn't hear it at all. His attention was all on training his divine sense, so he didn't have the time to bicker with Song Lanxin. Song Lanxin's group sped up for the rest of their journey. An hour later, they finally arrived near the giant frost toad's nest. Li Daochong's group of 4 walked step by step as they searched for the location of the supreme crystal stone mines scattered in the valley. They were not in a hurry. Less than 2 kilometers away from the giant frost toad's nest, Song Lanxin's group stopped. There were 4 Yuanying peak stage cultivators, 2 Yuanying late stage cultivators, and 1 Yuanying middle stage cultivator. The remaining 15 cultivators were all Jin Dan late stage and peak stage cultivators. Such a lineup was extremely terrifying no matter where it was placed. It was enough to start a small-scale war and sweep across the Federation's third ring. It was more than enough to destroy a ghost army. Song Lanxin looked at the cave with many ice stalagmites in the distance, her eyes shining. Hunting king-level ghost beasts was her coming-of-age ceremony. She wanted to let her grandfather and father see her ability. Although Miss Song Lanxin had a bad temper, she was not without dreams and ambitions. She also wanted to prove her ability to her family. She was not a rich young lady who only knew how to eat, drink, and play. "Grandfather, just you wait. I will definitely get the beast core and bring it to you. Xin has already grown up and can help you," Song Lanxin secretly said in her heart. Although the lineup was strong, the target was not to be trifled with. It was equivalent to hunting an early-stage spirit-severing peak stage cultivator. Even with such a lineup, there was no guarantee of victory. Under Old Man Qin's command, Yu Feng divided the 15 Jin Dan cultivators into 3 groups of 5. Yu Feng personally led a group of Jin Dan peak stage cultivators. Their battle strength was comparable to a Yuanying early-stage cultivator. However, the main force was O Zhiliang's group of 5. Because their previous plan had failed, O Zhiliang's group of 5 did not dare to make any rash moves. In fact, they had already felt that Old Man Chin's attitude towards them had changed. He was much more vigilant. Old Man Chin was an old Yuanying Peak stage cultivator in the Federation. He had many tricks up his sleeves, but his true strength was a mystery. No one knew Old Man Chin's true age. Even though Zhiliang's group of 5 was ruthless, they did not dare to fall out with Old Man Chin. Moreover, there was a Yuanying Peak stage cultivator with the surname Chen beside Old Man Chin. His strength was also a mystery. As for the Song family, as a super family in the Federation, no one knew how many life-saving trump cards Song Lanqin had. Along the way, Zhiliang's group of 5 had been secretly discussing what to do next. In the end, under Zhiliang's suggestion, they chose to compromise. After all, the temptation of being pardoned was too great. Since their plan to kill Song Lanqin's group had failed, they could only accept reality. If they did it again, they would definitely be exposed. At this time, Zhiliang's group of 5 had been ordered by Old Man Chin to attack the giant frost toad and restrain it. The 5 of them did not raise any objections. Old Man Chin, the giant frost toad's evolution is much higher than expected. I'm afraid it's not enough to rely on the 5 of us to restrain it. If you don't make a move, the previous situation may happen again. At that time, don't blame us for running away. Old Man Chin, you know what kind of existence a king-level ghost beast is. When everything was arranged, Inye's old face sank and he spoke first. After Old Man Chin heard this, his expression did not change. He only said, "You just need to follow the plan. Don't worry about anything else. As long as the 5 of you can stall the giant frost toad for 10 minutes, regardless of whether you can kill that beast in the end, you've completed your mission. What the young miss promised you before will be given to you. If you can't even stall it for 10 minutes, this old man has reason to doubt whether you've done your best." Just stall it for 10 minutes? Is this true? Zhiliang's eyes moved and he asked in disbelief. Yes. Old Man Chin nodded. Good. With Old Man Chin's words, the 5 of us will definitely do our best. Zhiliang immediately expressed his attitude. That's good. I hope you're all smart people and don't do things you shouldn't do. Old Man Chin nodded slightly and said something with a deeper meaning. Zhiliang's group of 5's faces did not change, but their hearts skipped a beat. It was clear that Old Man Chin was suspicious of what had happened before. Old Man Chin, when do we start? Zhiliang concealed the fluctuations in his heart and asked. Let's wait a little longer. Fellow Taoist Chen is arranging a spiritual array. Once it's done, we can start. Old Man Chin replied. About a few minutes later, a rustling sound came from the nearby frozen shrubs. The cultivator surnamed Chen, who was arranging the spiritual array, felt that it was strange, so he sent one of his bodyguards over to take a look. Just as the cultivator walked over, a cold light shot out from the frozen shrubs. The cultivator let out a blood-curdling scream as his chest was pierced through by an ice spike. Blood gushed out and a terrifying cold chi entered his body in an instant. Just as he finished screaming, the cultivator froze into an ice sculpture and stood there motionless. The blood that flowed out condensed into a blood-red ice flower. His mouth was wide open and his expression was one of horror. His eyes were wide open and his face was full of fear and unwillingness. The Jin Dan in his body was frozen and could no longer circulate. Everyone was startled by this scream. They didn't know what had happened, but when they looked over, the ice sculpture shrub had directly exploded. Dozens of white toads, each half the size of a human, jumped out. These large toads were covered in white frost, like white ghosts, and their bodies emitted a cold chi. As soon as they appeared, they pounced on each cultivator, constantly shooting ice spikes in the air. The lumps on their backs would naturally burst open and shoot out cold liquid. Ah, my hand! My eyes can't see, quickly take me away. What's wrong with my legs, why can't I move? Screams and cries of fear rose and fell one after another. Everything happened so suddenly that there was no time to react. The formation that had just been arranged was suddenly messed up. In the blink of an eye, several Jean Dan cultivators fell, and a few of them lost an arm or a leg. Song Lanshin had never seen such a scene before. Seeing the bloody scene of broken arms and legs, her beautiful face turned pale. Just a moment ago, she was ambitious and wanted to do something, but now she had long forgotten about it. Chapter 508. More than 10 ice spikes shot towards Song Lanshin. If not for Old Man Chin standing in front of her, she would have already turned into an ice hedgehog. Old Man Chin waved his hand and more than 10 silver flying swords shot out, blocking all the ice spikes. Everyone be careful, it's the young of the giant frost toad. Old Man Chin warned. But at this time, no one heard him. More than 10 white toads pounced on the cultivators like crazy. These white toads were not like the ones in the field that ate insects. Each of them was half the size of a person. Not only did they have long tongues, they also had serrated fangs. They pounced on the cultivators and bit them. The Jean Dan cultivators were unable to withstand the cold liquid in their mouth. After a few seconds they turned into ice sculptures. After a while, of the 15 Jean Dan bodyguards that Song Lanshin brought, only 2 or 3 of them were left. The rest had all died under the toads' mouths. Zhiliang's group of 5 was not at a disadvantage against more than 20 white toads. These 5 people had a savage nature. When faced with a life-threatening situation, their savagery would become even more vigorous. Zhiliang punched a white toad and turned it into meat paste. Pan Lingji waved a flexible sword in his hand and chopped off a white toad's head. Yi held an oil lamp in his hand that constantly shot out pillars of fire. When the white toads touched the pillars of fire, they would immediately be burned to charcoal. 2 female cultivators, Lu Jinfeng and Lan Ningzi, stood back to back. Lu Jinfeng held a hairpin in her hand. With a light toss, a black phoenix appeared and swallowed the white toads into its stomach. That black phoenix was actually real and not an illusion. Lan Ningzi's magic treasure was even more peculiar. It was a long metal whip. To be precise, it was more like a metal snake. If the whip landed on a white toad, it would directly dismember its body. The beast core within its body would also be shattered. These 5 people had outstanding battle strength. They blocked the sudden attack of the white toad. The cultivator surnamed Chen stood on the 5-pointed star on the ground. His hand constantly shot out talismans. There were also several banners floating around him. As soon as the white toad approached, the banner would immediately shoot out a spirit light attack. When Zhiliang saw this scene, he revealed a surprised expression. Spirit array-type magic weapons were extremely rare. This kind of magic weapon could both attack and defend. It was very practical, but it was not easy to master the technique of using it. It was more complicated than ordinary magic weapons. Elder Qin stayed by Song Lanshin's side the whole time. Yu Feng did the same. As the head of the bodyguards, his only responsibility was to protect Song Lanshin. As Yu Feng watched his companions fall one by one and die miserably, he was filled with grief and indignation. He wanted nothing more than to charge into the white toads and slice them into pieces. The number of white toads rapidly decreased. In just a few minutes, only a few of them were left after being killed by the Yuanying cultivators. Pan Lingji killed 4 white toads in a row. He was in the mood to kill them. The last white toad in front of him saw that the situation was not good. He turned around and tried to escape. How could Pan Lingji let it go? The sudden appearance of this group of beasts really gave him a fright. When one of them flew over his head, it actually urinated, and a cold liquid with a foul smell splashed on his head. Pan Lingji wanted to completely destroy his perfect image and kill all these ugly creatures. However, it would not be enough to relieve the hatred in his heart. Pan Lingji tapped his foot and shot out. He aimed at the back of the white toad that was trying to escape. If he hit it, the white toad would definitely be pierced through. Then, it would be melted into ice shards by his spiritual energy. Just as he was about to stab it, a sinister smile appeared on Pan Lingji's feminine face. Suddenly, the coarse white lumps on the white toad's back all burst open. Pan Lingji felt a chill run down his spine. He withdrew his strength and dodged to the side. Bang! Pan Lingji used all his strength and barely dodged it. However, a few drops still fell on his hand. In that instant, Pan Lingji felt that his hand was no longer his own. Moreover, the white cold liquid had penetrated his palm. Pan Lingji groaned and fell to the ground. He quickly took out a spiritual medicine and swallowed it. He immediately circulated his spiritual energy to heal his injuries, trying to force the cold qi that had invaded his body. If he didn't deal with it in time, even if Pan Lingji was a Yuanying cultivator, his hand would be crippled. However, just as Pan Lingji sat down to adjust his breathing, he felt that something was wrong. A shadow appeared above his head, as if a huge monster was squatting behind him. Pan Lingji raised his head in fear, and saw that a giant toad had appeared behind him at some point. Its huge body was the size of a house. Pan Lingji's hair stood on end. He let out a strange cry and ran away, ignoring the cold qi in his body. He didn't forget to shout, "Fellow Oh, save me!" In fact, there was no need for Pan Lingji to shout. Everyone else had already seen the huge white toad. This huge monster appeared very suddenly, as if it had appeared out of thin air. No one sensed its approach. The valley was already filled with cold qi, causing the perception of divine sense to drop sharply. Moreover, these ice toads were made of cold qi, so it was impossible to distinguish them in the valley. Oh Zhiliang and the other three heard Pan Lingji's shout and didn't do anything. They were proficient in killing people, but saving people? They didn't have that kind of awareness. Everyone watched as Pan Lingji fled. What happened next was something they would never forget for the rest of their lives. The huge toad opened its mouth and a shadow shot out. It was so fast that it couldn't be seen. Bang! In an instant, it shot Pan Lingji, who was already some distance away. The moment it was hit, the shadow froze. It was a tongue. A long tongue. A long tongue full of cold mucus. At this moment, Pan Lingji, who was flying in the air, was like a flying insect. Once he was stuck, he couldn't break free. Pan Lingji was desperate at that moment. He turned around and tried to use the soft sword in his hand to cut the long tongue that the huge toad shot out. However, before the sword could land, the tongue retracted. It was so fast that Pan Lingji was brought into the toad's mouth. The huge toad didn't seem to make any chewing movements. It swallowed Pan Lingji in one gulp. After a few seconds, Pan Lingji's aura disappeared. The first Yuanying cultivator fell. The huge toad's mouth was like an extremely cold place. Even a Yuanying cultivator like Pan Lingji couldn't resist that degree of cold qi. The moment he entered the toad's mouth, Pan Lingji was completely frozen into an ice sculpture. Pan Lingji's Yuanying cultivator didn't even have time to run. He was also frozen and became the toad's meal. A living person was swallowed just like that. Song Lanxin didn't dare to look. When she lowered her head, she saw a few white toads gnawing on the cultivators' corpses not far away. She immediately felt nauseous and vomited out all the spirit food that she had eaten not long ago. At this moment, besides Old Man Qin, Yu Feng and two other surviving cultivators also came over to Song Lanxin. Song Lanxin only had 6 bodyguards left. The other 2 cultivators were called Qin Jun and Zhu Peng. They were Yu Feng's comrade-in-arms when he joined the army. Yu Feng also risked his life to save the 2 of them. So scary. Song Lanxin looked at the giant frost toad and screamed in her heart. Along the way, she never thought that such a situation would happen. She thought that it was just a hunting game. She didn't think that so many of her bodyguards would die. Song Lanxin suddenly regretted coming to 13 Specter. A few days ago, she was still excitedly looking forward to hunting the giant frost toad. However, the hunting scene in her mind was completely different from what was happening in front of her. The scene in her mind should be of a group of cultivators chasing after a fat toad, shouting and whipping it with the whips in their hands. They chased the fat toad to a corner and cast a huge net, capturing it in one fell swoop. Song Lanxin's mind went blank. Just as she was at a loss, the giant toad moved. It opened its mouth again and spat out a mist. It was a cold mist. At the same time, the giant toad slapped the ground with its paw. There was a loud thud. The ground shook. Song Lanxin couldn't stand steadily. Old Man Qin's expression turned serious. The fluctuating ground and cold fog made it difficult for the golden core cultivators, who were already struggling to move. There was an ice flame net in the air, the ground was shaking, and the air was filled with cold mist. The giant toad jumped lightly and landed not far away from Song Lanxin's group. It raised its paw and slapped down. Old Man Qin carried Song Lanxin and jumped back. Yufeng and Chen Jun also dodged. Zhu Peng's luck wasn't so good. Just as he was about to dodge, the ground shook violently. He lost his balance and missed the best opportunity. The giant paw slapped down. Zhu Peng was smashed into a meat paste. Peng Zi. Yufeng and Chen Jun both shouted at the same time. They watched as their brother, who had gone through fire and water with them, turned into a meat paste. Damn beast! Kill it! Yufeng roared. Song Lanxin saw that Yufeng had lost control of his emotions. She stepped forward and grabbed his arm. Brother Yu, don't go. Calm down. Yufeng's face was filled with anger. When he turned to look at Song Lanxin, his anger calmed down. He gently pushed away Song Lanxin's hand and smiled gently. Miss, I'm sorry. This time, Yufeng can't listen to you. Don't you want to catch the toad? I'll go now. No. Old Man Qin, stop him. Song Lanxin screamed. Since Song Lanxin was 10 years old, Yufeng had always been by her side. He took her to and from school. When she grew older, Yufeng would teach her some cultivation trick. Song Lanxin would often tell Yufeng about her unhappiness. To Song Lanxin, Yufeng wasn't her bodyguard, but a big brother who protected her. This was a relationship that other bodyguards didn't have. However, Old Man Qin didn't care about Song Lanxin's screams. He was fully focused on another direction. He didn't care about Yufeng's movements. Song Lanxin wanted to grab Yufeng, but how could she do that with her little strength? Yufeng and Chen Jun both charged at the giant toad. Almost at the same time, Old Man Qin transmitted a message to O Zhiliang and the others. The spirit array is set up. Go. O Zhiliang and the others' faces stiffened. They seemed to hesitate, but in the end, they still charged at the giant toad. Yufeng and Chen Jun stood on the left and right. The former held a long sword while the latter held a long blade. They didn't leave any room for negotiation. Dang! Dang! 2 crisp sounds were heard. The mysterious level weapons slashed at the giant toad's body. It was as if they had slashed at a golden pillar. They didn't even leave a mark. The giant toad waved its paw and Chen Jun was sent flying. Yufeng slashed at him again, but it was still useless. Soon after, the toad's tongue shot out. Yufeng raised his sword to block. He wasn't stuck, but the huge force sent him flying. Bah! After landing, Yufeng spat out a mouthful of saliva and charged at the toad again. Swoosh! A beam of cold light shot out. Yufeng didn't even have time to react. The cold light pierced through his body. He looked down and saw an ice spike as thick as a bucket. It pierced through his chest and came out from his back, piercing into the ground. Cold qi crazily entered Yufeng's body. His body was freezing at a visible speed. In the next moment, Yufeng looked at Song Lanxin and smiled. He said, "Take care." Then, he turned into an ice sculpture. The Jin Dan in his body was frozen and cracked. Genius remembered the address of this website in 1 second. Mobile version website, M. Chapter 509. Seeing Yufeng die, Song Lanxin burst into tears. At this moment, she suddenly felt a fear she had never felt before. She had thought of things too simply. This was 13 Specter, not a hunting ground. In the hunting ground, the prey was always the prey. In 13 Specter, it was unknown who was the prey and who was the hunter. Just like now, Song Lanxin had brought a group of cultivators to capture the giant frost toad, but now they had become the toad's food. Song Lanxin had thought that she was the hunter, but now she realized that they weren't the hunters. The giant frost toad was. As soon as Yufeng died, Chen Jun was turned into an ice sculpture by the giant frost toad's cold air. Golden core cultivators couldn't even fight back in front of the giant frost toad. Old Man Qin originally thought that Yufeng and Yu Yang would be able to cause some trouble for the giant frost toad in their rage, but in the end, the two of them died in a single exchange. Zhiliang's group of 4 rushed up together. The 4 of them had been together for a long time, so they already had a tacit understanding with each other. Zhiliang was usually the vanguard, Yin Yi was the long-range pincer, and the 2 female cultivators would attack from the left and right. Pan Lingji would usually hide and launch a sneak attack. Ever since the 5 of them had formed a team, they had never lost against an enemy. They had killed a grand wizard, fought the ghoul army, and even clashed with the cultivator army. The 5 of them used this method to win battle after battle. This time, without Pan Lingji, they only lacked a sneak attack. It didn't affect their overall combat strength much. Zhiliang's spiritual energy surged like an arrow and shot towards the giant frost toad. All his power was concentrated on his right fist. Almost at the same time, Yin Ye's oil lamp Dharma treasure shot a pillar of fire towards the giant frost toad. Lan Ningzi pulled out his whip from the left. Lu Jinfeng controlled the black phoenix-like bird to rush towards the giant frost toad from the right. The 4 Yuanying cultivators attacked at the same time. Bang! Crack! Zhiliang's fist landed on the giant frost toad. First, there was a muffled sound, followed by the sound of bones breaking. Zhiliang's eyes were filled with shock. He knew very well how powerful this punch was. It was powerful enough to change the landscape and environment. However, when it hit the giant frost toad, it only made a sound that was neither painful nor itchy. Then, the bones in Zhiliang's hand cracked. The temperature of the yang fire spewed out by the Yin Yi oil lamp was astonishing. The frost on the ground was instantly melted. Yin Yi didn't attack blindly. Instead, he chose to attack the giant frost toad's weakest spot, its white and plump belly. Whoosh! Whoosh! However, after the pillar of fire struck the frost giant toad's abdomen, it only left behind a few gusts of wind. Then, the pillar of fire dissipated, leaving not even a single burn mark on the frost giant toad's white abdomen. Before the black phoenix controlled by Lu Jinfeng could get close, the giant frost toad opened its mouth and flicked its tongue, swallowing the black phoenix into its stomach. Of course, the black bird wasn't a black phoenix. If it was a phoenix, the giant frost toad wouldn't be able to do anything. True dragons and true phoenixes were divine beasts of the spirit realm. They were powerful existences comparable to tribulation transcending immortals or Mahayana immortals. If it really was a phoenix, how could it have been swallowed by the giant frost toad in one gulp? Lu Jinfeng almost shouted, but it was too late. Her precious pet had already become the giant frost toad's meal. Lan Ningzi's whip seemed fierce, but when it struck the giant frost toad, it felt like it was just playing around. When the giant frost toad breathed out cold air, the metal whip transformed into a silver rod. The 4 Yuanying cultivators attacked at the same time, using their best techniques, but to no avail. The giant frost toad didn't even need to move to dissolve their attacks. It destroyed the magic treasures of 2 of the cultivators and injured the strongest, Zhiliang. However, they managed to attract the giant frost toad's attention, giving the cultivator surnamed Chen the opportunity to activate the spirit formation. Old Man Qin also attacked. Several tens of flying swords flew out from his storage ring and shot towards the giant frost toad like a meteor shower. Fellow Taoist Chen, your 7 stars devil-subduing formation should be able to capture this beast. Old Man Qin said in a deep voice after shooting out the flying swords. I have at least an 80% chance of trapping the giant frost toad, the cultivator surnamed Chen replied with complete confidence. That's good. Old Man Qin nodded. But just as Old Man Qin finished speaking, a huge explosion sounded. The cultivator surnamed Chen's face paled, and he spat out a mouthful of blood as he flew backwards. The 7 stars devil-subduing formation that the cultivator surnamed Chen had painstakingly set up was shattered by the giant frost toad as soon as it was activated. The cultivator surnamed Chen, who had been maintaining a connection with the spirit formation, instantly suffered a backlash and was heavily injured before he could react. The dozens of flying swords that Old Man Qin released were originally meant to assist the spirit array in suppressing the giant frost toad. However, without the support of the spirit array, these flying swords were frozen by the terrifying frost energy before they could even get close to the giant frost toad. Old Man Qin wanted to control the flying swords again, but there was no response. The extremely cold qi had completely severed his connection with the flying swords. Old Man Qin's expression was extremely ugly. He wanted to retreat. From the beginning to the end, he only had one mission, which was to protect Song Lanxin's safety. Everything else was trivial. Whether or not they could catch the giant frost toad was not important at all. With that thought, Old Man Qin picked up Song Lanxin and flew backward. He didn't care about the others. Zhiliang and the other 3 also felt the danger. The giant frost toad was too strong and wasn't something they could deal with. The divine transformation realm was indeed the divine transformation realm. It wasn't something that the Yuanying realm could contend against. Zhiliang and the other 3 didn't communicate and flew backwards at the same time. How could the giant frost toad let go of these insects that killed its offsprings? It lightly jumped and extended its tongue towards Zhiliang. This cruel Yuanying realm cultivator was so scared that he peed his pants. He didn't dare to be careless and immediately took out his natal magic treasure. It was a staff refined from a star soul crystal core. He struck the staff towards the giant frost toad's tongue. Gua! The giant frost toad let out a deafening cry. Its tongue was a very soft part and this strike hurt the giant frost toad. Cold qi was spat out from its mouth. Zhiliang's body instantly burned with a ball of flame. The mysterious azure true fire was spat out from his body. The cold qi and the true fire collided. The flames on Zhiliang's body were instantly extinguished. However, it managed to resist the terrifying cold qi and didn't let him turn into an ice sculpture. Zhiliang took the opportunity to fly backwards. The giant frost toad was annoyed that it couldn't catch this insect. It saw that there was another insect below that was struggling to escape. Cultivator Chen was injured and his speed was greatly affected. He was also the slowest one to escape with all his might. The giant frost toad immediately slapped its palm towards Cultivator Chen. The latter roared and took out several banners to form a protective barrier. The giant palm slapped on the barrier. Cultivator Chen spat out another mouthful of blood. His face was completely pale as he painfully supported the barrier that was on the verge of collapse. Cracks appeared on the flagpole. The flagpole made from spirit-channeling magic gold couldn't withstand the giant frost toad's attack. On the other side, Song Lanxin, who was taken away by Old Man Qin, landed in a safe area. She pulled Old Man Qin's sleeve and said, "Grandpa Qin, wait a moment. Take Brother Yu's body away. I want to bring him home." Old Man Qin sighed, "Miss, that beast is too strong. I can't get close to it. We can only find Yu Feng's body in the future. There's no chance to take it away now." Song Lanxin looked at Yu Feng's chest that was pierced by a huge ice spike. Tears flowed down from her eyes uncontrollably. Miss, let's go. If we don't go now, I'm afraid we won't be able to leave. That beast is angry. If it releases more cold energy, even I won't be able to resist it, Old Man Qin said and pulled Song Lanxin towards the valley. Song Lanxin looked at Yu Feng reluctantly. She couldn't do anything. Suddenly, Song Lanxin mustered up courage. She shook off Old Man Qin's hand and prepared to recklessly charge towards Yu Feng. She wanted to put his body into her storage ring. Old Man Qin didn't expect Song Lanxin to break free from his grasp. He was careless and allowed Song Lanxin to break free. Song Lanxin struggled free and was about to run towards Yu Feng's corpse when a frozen arm fell from the sky and landed in front of Song Lanxin. Then, a leg, a torso, and a head all fell from the sky in front of Song Lanxin. They were all parts of that cultivator surnamed Chen's body. Now, they had all been dismembered into frozen pieces. Song Lanxin, who had just mustered up her courage, was dumbfounded when she saw the frozen corpses. Her mind went blank. The ferocious and terrifying scene instantly extinguished the flame of courage that had ignited in her heart. Old Man Qin took this opportunity to grab Song Lanxin once more and pulled her back. Song Lanxin was pulled around in a daze. Her mind was in a mess. However, when she turned around, a cyan figure walked out of the valley filled with cold fog. Weren't they all dead? Why was there still someone here? Song Lanxin instinctively thought. She couldn't help but look over. Soon, the green figure became clear. Li Daochong placed his hands behind his back and strode forward. He was neither in a hurry nor in a hurry, as if he was taking a stroll in the evening. His pair of clear black eyes calmly looked at the insufferably arrogant giant frost toad in the distance. When she saw who it was, Song Lanxin's heart was filled with mixed feelings. She bit her lower lip and said to Li Daochong, "Are you here to laugh at me?" There was no response. Li Daochong's attention was all on the giant ice toad. He didn't care about Song Lanxin at all. When Old Man Qin saw Li Daochong walking towards the giant ice toad, he kindly reminded, "Young man, you're going the wrong way. Don't try to show off. Run while you still have time. You won't be able to escape in a bit." Li Daochong still didn't hear anything. He walked past Old Man Qin and Song Lanxin as if he hadn't seen them from the start. "Grandpa Qin, if he wants to die, just let him be. A mangy dog like him won't shed tears until he sees the coffin. Just let him die." Song Lanxin, who was ignored, became angry again and sneered coldly. Old Man Qin turned his head and looked at Li Daochong's back. He couldn't help but shake his head in pity. After Li Daochong brushed past Song Lanxin, his speed suddenly increased. With a swoosh, he shot towards the giant ice toad like an arrow. The furious giant ice toad had just killed a worm and was about to chase after the other worms. However, it didn't expect that there would be another worm that didn't run away and even took the initiative to chase after it. Gwa! The giant ice toad let out a roar and opened its mouth. Its tongue shot out like a cannonball towards Li Daochong, who was flying towards it. Whoosh! An inky radiance flashed past. A huge tongue that was 10 meters long and 1 meter in diameter fell to the ground. Bang! Li Daochong swung his saber and chopped off the tongue. Without slowing down, he pulled back his saber and threw a punch at the giant ice toad's abdomen, letting out a muffled sound. The giant ice toad's huge body flew backwards, leaving behind a deep trench that was tens of meters long. All the ice sculptures and trees in this line were crushed. Old Man Qin and Song Lanxin looked at this scene with their mouths wide open. Their brain circuits immediately short-circuited. Song Lanxin's mocking words turned into a big slap on her face. Old Man Qin was petrified on the spot. His heart trembled. This young man clearly didn't have a strong aura, but he actually sent a king-level ghost beast flying with a punch? What kind of monstrous strength was this? Zhiliang and the other three naturally felt something as they ran. They all turned around and saw the giant ice toad being sent flying by Li Daochong. The four felons were dumbfounded. Just a few hours ago, they were planning to rob this young man and his companions and use them as cannon fodder to capture the giant ice toad. At this moment, they suddenly realized how lucky they were. Baidu search 81 Chinese Websidio. No advertising message. Chapter 510. Li Daochong heavily injured the giant frost toad with a simple slash and punch. A king-level ghost beast's consciousness was almost the same as a human's. The giant frost toad looked at Li Daochong in horror. Li Daochong's footsteps were neither fast nor slow. With each step, his figure flashed and appeared dozens of meters away. In the blink of an eye, he appeared in front of the giant frost toad. Li Daochong raised his fist and punched out without any fancy move. The giant frost toad was terrified. Its eyes shot out a ray of light and its mouth spat out a highly concentrated cold liquid. Li Daochong's eyes were alert. Lightning flashed in his eyes and 2 bolts of lightning shot out. They collided with the cold liquid spat out by the giant frost toad. The cold liquid was instantly evaporated by the lightning power. The lightning power did not diminish and blasted onto the giant frost toad. The giant monster screamed in pain. Li Daochong punched out. Bang! There was a muffled sound similar to the previous one. The giant frost toad's abdomen caved in deeply. Once again, it was sent flying dozens of meters away. By the time its giant body stopped, Li Daochong had already landed on the giant frost toad's abdomen. Li Daochong placed one hand on the giant frost toad's abdomen. An electric current streaked across his hand and entered the giant frost toad. Buzz, the giant frost toad's huge body was constantly emitting electric sparks. Its eyes were filled with horror. It wanted to break free, but it had no strength. The purity of the spiritual yang lightning had taken a qualitative leap after Li Daochong broke through to the Yuanying realm. The yin energy in the giant frost toad's body was completely suppressed by the yang lightning. It could not be released. Found it. Li Daochong used his telekinesis and immediately withdrew it. A white pill the size of an ostrich egg was taken out of his body. This was the giant frost toad's king-level beast core. This core was filled with yin energy. If thrown aside, the area within 100 kilometers would be immersed in an extremely cold world under the influence of this beast core. There would not be any changes for 1,000 years. Looking at the beast core, Li Daochong smiled faintly and put the beast core into his storage ring. Beast cores were not very useful to Li Daochong. However, this thing was extremely useful to cultivators who cultivated ice-type cultivation methods. It could almost guarantee that ice-type cultivators could enter the nascent soul stage. Apart from the beast core, Li Daochong needed every part of the giant frost toad. With such a large pile of materials, he could use them to his heart's content when crafting high-level ice-type talismans. Beep! Killed a king-tier ghost beast. Soul power converted and spirit energy gained. Host has leveled up to level 25. Just level 25 level 25, level 25, level 25 level 25, level 25 level 25 level 25 toad level 25, level. Li Daochong's body trembled slightly as a huge amount of spiritual qi surged crazily within his body. It soared all the way until he reached the middle stage of the nascent soul realm. The amount of spirit qi obtained from killing a king-level ghost beast was much more than Li Daochong had imagined. The spirit qi contained the qi of ice, which constantly washed over Li Daochong's nascent soul. Under the washing of the qi of ice, the little baby slowly grew from the original 3 inches to 6 inches. Yuanying. Li Daochong's body was shining with golden light. After the sun Yuanying was nourished by the ice spirit qi, it was no longer as dazzling. It seemed to have weakened, but in fact, it had become more condensed. There was also the ice spirit chi. This was an aura that Li Daochong did not have. This special aura could only be produced under two circumstances. One was when the mystic heaven ice spirit vein was born. The other was when the cultivator cultivated ice technique. Li Daochong did not belong to any of the above. He had only absorbed the giant frost toad's soul power, and this ice spirit chi appeared on his own. This short interlude did not affect Li Daochong's enthusiasm. He immediately put the giant frost toad's corpse into his storage ring. Li Daochong casually killed the giant frost toad, as if he had just killed an insignificant toad. Before Li Daochong came, the giant frost toad had killed all the bodyguards that Song Lanxin had brought. 2 Yuanying cultivators were killed in an instant. The remaining 5 cultivators fled in all directions. Song Lanxin felt that the sky was falling. But the moment Li Daochong appeared, that frost giant toad immediately became unable to withstand a single blow and was easily killed. The ice flame net above the valley gradually dissipated. The cold fog also dissipated little by little in the valley wind. Song Lanxin bit her lower lip and looked at Li Daochong with mixed feelings. She didn't expect that this kid, whom she hated and looked down upon, was so powerful. She could not accept it for a while. Old Man Qin, as a peak cultivator of the Yuanying, looked at Li Daochong with surprise. He constantly searched for information about this young man in front of him. But no matter how he searched, Old Man Qin could not remember seeing this person. But this kind of strength was definitely among the top in the Federation. How could he not have any impression of him? Zhiliang and the other 3 were floating in the air. Their eyes were also complicated. There was surprise, relief, and hidden greed. They were surprised because they did not expect Li Daochong to be so strong. Fortunately, they did not make a move right from the start. Otherwise, the 5 of them would not be left with just 4 people, but all of them would have been killed. The hidden greed was mainly from the 2 female cultivators. Lan Yingzi and Lu Jinfeng had never seen such a powerful cultivator. The most important thing was that he was so young. If she could become his dual day partner, she would be able to do whatever she wanted in the Shenghua Federation. She would also be able to write off all her previous crimes. She would not have to risk her life for freedom like she was doing now. The 2 female cultivators who were felons only thought about it. They also knew that it was almost impossible to seduce a cultivator of this level with beauty. Under the shocked gazes of the few people, Li Daochong slowly walked into the frozen valley forest. Not long after, he arrived outside a cave covered in ice and snow. A graceful ice sculpture stood outside the cave. It was Goddess Hongyang, who was called along by Song Lanxin. After getting off the flying shuttle, Goddess Hongyang received Elder Qin's telepathic message. Elder Qin arranged for her to hide first and then find a chance to sneak into the giant frost toad's nest to steal the giant toad egg. From the beginning, Elder Qin felt that the probability of killing the giant frost toad was very low. He made 2 preparations. One was to hunt the giant frost toad according to the plan. The other was to let Goddess Hongyang steal the giant toad egg. With Fairy Hongyang's strength, Old Man Qin believed that stealing the toad egg was a cinch. At the very least, she would be able to obtain the giant frost toad egg. At that time, even if she couldn't kill the giant frost toad, she would at least be able to return with the egg. However, Elder Qin did not expect the giant frost toad to be so sensitive and aggressive during its spawning period. Goddess Hongyang was already very careful. However, when she approached the nest, the giant frost toad spat out a breath of cold air and froze her. Li Daochong looked at Goddess Hongyang, who was frozen into an ice sculpture. He slowly reached out his hand and placed it on the ice sculpture. A gentle spirit energy slowly flowed out. The crystal-like ice that covered Goddess Hongyang's body melted. The Goddess Hongyang's frozen body gradually revealed itself. Actually, Goddess Hongyang's eyes did not lose their luster. She was just frozen. The cold air even sealed her yuanying. Goddess Hong Yang used all her energy to resist the cold air and tried her best to maintain her consciousness. Goddess Hong Yang's frozen body was quickly drenched by the melted ice water. Then, her entire body began to emit mist. At this time, Zhiliang and the other three, as well as Elder Qin and Song Lanxin, followed Li Daocheng's footsteps out of curiosity. When they arrived, Goddess Hong Yang's entire body was surrounded by the evaporated mist. The mist dissipated. Goddess Hong Yang's face was rosy, and her clothes were clean and fresh. She looked at Li Daocheng with gratitude. "Thank you, Li Daocheng, for saving me." Li Daocheng withdrew his hand and nodded slightly. "You're welcome. Since we're traveling together, we're companions. When a companion is in trouble, it's only right to help." After he finished speaking, Li Daocheng released a green light into the sky. It seemed to be some kind of signal. Not long after, Tang Guangbei, Yu Yan, and Cherry Blossom Gauze walked out of the dense forest. "Elder Tang, is the detection result out?" Li Daocheng asked. "It's out. The amount of extreme Yin crystals in this valley is very large. It's far beyond my expectations. Not only can we satisfy our own needs, but we can also sell them to the military in large quantities. Li Daoyu, we've made a lot of money this time," Tang Guangbei said excitedly. Chapter 511. Li Daocheng glanced at Zhiliang's group and Old Man Qin, who had followed them out of curiosity, and nodded. "Then let's start mining." Li Daocheng's eyes were calm, but when he glanced at them, the yuanying cultivators felt their hair stand on end. Tang Guangbei was originally quite afraid of Zhiliang's group, but after seeing Li Daocheng easily kill the giant frost toad, he was full of confidence. Even if these vicious fellows knew the purpose of their trip, there was nothing to be afraid of. Tang Guangbei immediately informed Goddess Hong Yang, Yu Yan, and Cherry Blossom Gauze of the area he had scouted. Then, he and Li Daocheng began to excavate the largest extreme Yin crystal mine near the nest. Zhiliang's group, as well as Old Man Qin and Song Lanxin, began to mine as if there was no one else present. Under Li Daocheng's instructions, Cherry Blossom Gauze placed the giant frost toad's corpse into his storage bag. Although the extreme Yin crystal mine was buried deep underground, it wasn't difficult to dig it out. However, after digging it out, it needed to be refined. This process was originally quite complicated, but Tang Guangbei had the Tang family's newly developed magic gold separator. He only needed to put the ore in and wait for a period of time, then the pure extreme Yin crystal would automatically be separated. About half a day later, the entire extreme Yin crystal mine in the valley had been mined out. Not even a grain of ore was left behind. Tang Guangbei looked at the extreme Yin crystal being separated, and his old eyes bloomed with joy. There were more than 300 kilograms of extreme Yin crystal. It was 7 to 8 times more than the 40 kilograms he had estimated. Extreme Yin crystal may not be considered a precious magic gold, but due to the harsh conditions for its formation, there was a relatively small amount of it. Therefore, its value was 2 to 3 times higher than it should be. The market price of 1 kilogram of extreme Yin crystal was around 300 high-grade spirit stones, and it was usually sold by the gram. Only a small amount of extreme Yin crystal was needed to change the properties of magic treasures and magic robes, obtaining attribute bonuses. This time, Li Daocheng was naturally the biggest winner. He already had a priceless magic pill. Now, he had a king-grade ghost beast core, a complete king-grade ghost beast corpse, and several extreme Yin crystals. Even though Tang Guangbei had the Tang family backing him, he didn't dare to compete with Li Daocheng, whose strength was unfathomable. In the end, Tang Guangbei and Goddess Hong Yang split the remaining 50 kilograms of extreme Yin crystal between Li Daocheng and Li Daocheng. Everyone was very satisfied with this result. Li Daocheng wanted to give some to Yu Yan, but the latter refused to accept it. In the end, Li Daochong gave Yu Yen another big gift. He refined the beast core into 10 ice spirit pills and gave Yu Yen 3 of them. Then, he personally channeled the power of the pills to Yu Yen, raising Yu Yan's cultivation from Jin Dan early stage to Jin Dan late stage. During this process, Li Daochong helped Yu Yen block all the lightning tribulations. Due to the chaotic aura of 13 Specter, the lightning tribulations weren't strong. In fact, even without Li Daochong's help, Yu Yen could handle it herself. However, with Li Daochong's help, the lightning tribulations were only a little stronger than a mosquito bite. Moreover, this was only the beginning. Li Daochong also connected Yu Yan's spirit meridians and nurtured the Jin Dan. It was only a matter of time before Yu Yen broke through to the yuanying stage. Because of this, Yu Yen gained another divine ability, the Frost Thorn. Li Daochong only took a day to complete all of this. During this time, Tang Guangbei didn't stay idle either. Li Daochong asked Tang Guangbei to make a black robe in the shape of a martial artist's robe, which required 15 kilograms of extreme Yin crystals. Tang Guangbei found it strange, but he didn't ask anything. This young man's importance in Tang Guangbei's heart was comparable to the soul formation grand cultivators of the Federation. It was better not to ask too much about this level of cultivator. For the next 3 days, Li Daochong and the others were busy in the secluded valley. For some reason, O Zhiliang, Elder Qin, and Song Lanxin didn't leave. After seeing how strong Li Daochong was, they all wanted to befriend him. More importantly, outside the secluded valley was the Dark Soul mountain range. Even though they weren't weak, they weren't confident that they could walk out safely. Relying on the strong was definitely a good way to protect themselves on 13 Specter. Elder Qin's thoughts were more complicated. He still wanted to gain some benefit. If he returned empty-handed, Song Lanxin's position as the successor might be affected. Li Daoyu, this old man has a presumptuous request. I hope you can fulfill it. After waiting for 3 days, Elder Qin finally saw Li Daochong walk out of the giant frost toad's nest. Please speak. Li Daochong glanced at Elder Qin and said lightly, Fellow Taoist, Li is a heaven-sent genius. You have such heaven-defying abilities at such a young age. This old man is ashamed. Even after cultivating for 100 years, I was only a slightly stronger ant in front of that giant frost toad. Old man Qin praised again, but he was interrupted halfway by Li Daochong. If you have something to say, just say it. Li Daochong frowned slightly. Elder Qin saw Li Daochong's displeasure and hurriedly said, Li Daochong, this old man wants to buy the beast core in your hand. The price is negotiable. It's 20% higher than the market price. What do you think? I've already used it, Li Daochong said bluntly. Elder Qin's old eyes instantly turned into 2 small black dots. Used it? Used it just like that? A king-level beast core was used just like that? Elder Qin broke out in cold sweat. A series of questions flashed through his mind, but he didn't believe Li Daochong's words. He thought that Li Daochong was unwilling to sell the beast core. Li Daochong, this old man is willing to take out 50,000 high-grade spirit stones to buy the king-level beast core in your hand. In addition, you will also receive a Cloud Jade Vestment VIP membership card. You can enjoy a 20% discount on all Cloud Jade Vestment products. Elder Qin hesitated for a moment before continuing. Elder Qin had watched Song Lanxin grow up, and the Song Federation was Elder Qin's best friend. Elder Qin had no children in his life and already saw Song Lanxin as his own granddaughter. Elder Qin didn't want Song Lanxin to ruin her bright future because of her personality. If the mission to hunt the giant frost toad failed, Song Lanxin's position as the first successor of the Cloud Jade Vestment would be seriously shaken. Cloud Jade Vestment was a super-large cultivation company. It wasn't a family that had the final say, even if Cloud Jade Vestment was founded by the Song Federation 300 years ago. However, after 300 years, Cloud Jade Vestment was no longer under the control of the Song Federation alone. There were many interest groups involved, and even the government of the Federation had shares in the company. However, the Song Federation still had the final say, but it had to be reasonable. Currently, other than Song Lanxin's talent in telekinesis, it was difficult for her to convince the public in other aspects. If it weren't for the Song Federation protecting Song Lanxin, the board of directors would have stripped her of her position as the first successor. The reason why the Song Federation took the risk to send Song Lanxin to 13 Specter to hunt the giant frost toad was because the pressure from the board of directors was increasing. Even the old man couldn't take it anymore. If Song Lanxin didn't show some ability, the old man wouldn't be able to hold on any longer. Old Man Qin knew very well that if she didn't return the Beast Dawn, it would be extremely difficult for Song Lanxin to achieve anything in the future. At most, she would be a young lady in the Song family and be married off to someone of equal social status. Elder Qin didn't want to see Song Lanxin end up like this. As long as it was within his power, he would help her no matter what. I said it's been used, so it's been used. Even if you give me 500 million high-grade spirit stones, I'll sell it to you, Li Daochong replied coldly. Elder Qin was speechless. He looked at Li Daochong with his old eyes, trying to find something from this young man's face. However, in the end, he realized that Li Daochong wasn't joking. Did he really use it? Elder Qin's eyes twitched. If he really used it, wouldn't it mean that the mission to hunt the giant frost toad was completely ruined? Elder Qin was unwilling to give up. He quickly circulated his telekinesis and thought of a solution. Li Daoyu, are you selling the giant frost toad's corpse? I can pay the same price. You know that the most valuable part of a ghost beast is its beast core. Although the corpse has many uses, it's worth less than the beast core. Elder Qin grasped at the last straw. I'm not selling it. Li Daochong flatly refused without the slightest hesitation. His attitude was extremely clear. This matter could not be discussed. After saying that, Li Daochong walked away. Elder Qin was anxious. He stepped forward and stopped Li Daochong. Li Daoyu, please wait. We can discuss the price. How about this? I'll add another 20,000 high-grade spirit stones and give you a supreme card of the Cloud Jade Vestment Company. There are only 5 of these cards in the entire Federation, and they are all owned by soul formation stage experts. With this card, you can ask the chairman of the Cloud Jade Vestment Company, Mr. Song, to make a heavenly Xian vestment for you. The materials will be free. You only need to pay the cost of making it. The price will definitely not be less than 100,000 high-grade spirit stones. When Elder Qin said this, Tang Guangbei happened to walk out of the lair. When he heard that Elder Qin promised to give Li Daochong the supreme card of the Cloud Jade Vestment Company, Tang Guangbei was shocked. He immediately sent a voice transmission to Li Daochong. Fellow Taoist Li, I've managed to make the robe you want, but I'm not a refiner. I only know a little about it. If you want a truly high-quality robe, you'll have to ask the people from Cloud Jade Robe to make it. Li Daochong was unhappy with Elder Qin's persistent pestering. He was about to reject him in an even colder tone, but after hearing Tang Guangbei's words, his eyes flickered. If he wanted to hide the death chi on the cherry blossom gauze, he would need a good vestment. Tang Guangbei's words were also admitting that the Tang family's skills in this area were limited. They couldn't be compared to the Cloud Jade Vestment Company. You're a weapon refiner? Li Daochong suddenly asked Elder Qin. Elder Qin was stunned for a moment. He didn't know what he meant, but he replied, I'm not that talented. I just received a special grade weapon refiner certification a few years ago. Li Daochong's heart skipped a beat. He didn't expect this old man to be a special grade weapon refiner. He said, I have a use for the giant frost toad's corpse. It's impossible for me to give it all to you. However, if you can make a vestment according to my request, I can give you a part of the corpse. You don't have to pay for it. How about it? When Old Man Chin heard this, his spirits were lifted. If there was something to talk about, then it would be easy. Making a Taoist robe would be easy. However, Old Man Chin felt that something was wrong. He had offered such a high price, but Li Daochong was unmoved. Now, he suddenly changed his mind and said that he only needed to make a single Taoist robe. Wasn't it a little too simple? Old Man Chin had a doubtful look on his face. Just making a robe is enough? Li Daochong nodded. That's right. Elder Chin was still worried. He continued to ask, May I know what level of vestment Li Dao you wants? Li Daochong thought for a moment. The level isn't important. As long as you can mix the extreme Yin crystal into the vestment, the attributes of the extreme Yin crystal will be maximized. That's it? Elder Chin couldn't believe it. This was too simple. At least, it was too simple for a weapon refiner like him. That's it, Li Daochong replied with certainty. Okay, deal. Elder Chin agreed immediately after receiving a definite answer. The old man knew that at Li Daochong's level, he wouldn't go back on his word. Genius memorized this site's address in 1 second. Mobile version of reading website. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.